right, hello everybody. Hope you're doing well. I see my mic is actually on for once, beginning a stream. So, all right. Astanex, Colo RPG, Errant Vice, Titan, Goddess Spaghetti, Mercy. Nice to have all of you again. So yes, Astanex said that you thought the streams were over after the meme video. I was working on the Final Fantasy 16 review. That's partially right. I said I was probably going to stop them at the end of the weekend, which is what I intend to do. So this will be my last reaction stream for a little bit at least, while I work on producing some other content. So first up in order, I want to do the Final Fantasy 16 review. Then I want to cover a couple topics relating to Elden Ring. Maybe something about the Curse of Dung Eater, the role of the Deathbed Companions in Fia, some kind of interesting things about the trees that I've been looking into recently, and a couple other topics which I just can't think of off the top of my head right now. So, right. Yeah, I did see that Honored Madman has actually been producing like a couple videos. He's been pretty busy, and thanks for throwing them in the Discord. You like seeing Shalqua loafing around in Majula? Hey Stella, nice to have you in. Okay, so yesterday on stream, we watched a couple videos. Well, actually more than a couple. We watched the disturbing real-life lore behind Elden Ring's Thorn Sorcerers by Infomercial. Then Square Table's gaming videos about the Land of Reeds essentially being Sekiro, which was not the take that I was hoping that they were going to go for there, to be honest. Then we had Elden Ring, What Makes These Perfumers So Depraved by the Lore Hunter. Then the biggest changes to item descriptions between the network test and the full release by the Lore Hunter, followed by the architecture of Castle Morn. And then we watched Smotown's video on duality and twins. And then we finished it off with Elden Ring is Full of Crap, talking about the pre-release description of the gold-tinged excrement, which turned out to be the same as the full release. So it was just a very short video and to the point. So today we're going to look at two other videos, one by Jarhead69, 7 questions for the Usurping Theory Answered, Elden Ring by Jarhead69. So we did watch the first part of this theory a month back or so. Like, this is one of the earlier React streams that we did, and I had talked and left a comment on Jarhead's video about like my reactions. He did actually watch my reaction and replied to it, so I figured before going into his video, I'll reply, or I'll read it out loud for you guys, or part of it at least. All right, so he said, thanks so much for going through the video. They can't believe it even got suggested. It's amazing. Okay, I don't really need to read that. They're glad the timeline visuals came across, and they're grateful for all the areas that I mentioned that are still actually ambiguous. It's really valuable info. They really appreciated all the production advice as well. It's been a big learning experience, and the feedback's been helpful. Work on the sound stuff. Okay. So they said that they've already recorded the audio for a second follow-up video, so they won't be able to specifically address many of the concerns that I brought up. But they do go into a lot of detail on the implied close relationship between Miquella and Godwin, as well as going deeper into where they're coming from in regard to Goldmask's heretical thoughts and why they believe Radagon and the Two Fingers would want to maintain a facade of order over the lands between. A lot of it still doesn't actually exactly depend on Radagon masquerading as America, but they're still confident there's a sound basis for exploration. They may be completely wrong, but it might help steer towards some more concrete answers. So, on the twins getting their great runes, they agree they didn't really explain it very clearly or in depth, or in enough depth, and that they did speculate that Marika gave the great runes to her children, but they weren't taking the twins into consideration, and they would have admitted that part of the video looking back. So, they've been thinking and should have mentioned that Radagon would have been the one to give the rune shards to the twins, and that he'd be hoping that the twins would either take back the other shards from the other demigods, or help him to strengthen or rebuild his empire. And I have some like criticisms about this, but I think that just kind of goes a bit too far beyond the text for me personally, but that's just kind of more like in the realm of headcanon, which is fine. So with Roger's dialogue, I was right that Jarhead misattributed his description of the Night of Black Knives to the Age of Plenty, when it's only described as during the Golden Age of the Erdtree. As we know, the Age of Plenty was brief. It most likely wasn't synonymous with the Golden Age, so there's a good chance it ended early in Godfrey's reign. So it's incorrect and misleading to say that this proves Godwin's death was during Godfrey's reign, as we don't know when the Golden Age ended. They'd still argue that the Golden Age would have ended with Godfrey's golden lineage, with his banishment and Godwin's death. So, for anybody who didn't catch the first stream of Jarhead's usurpation theory, it feels a little bit like Inception. They believed that the Shattering was when how do I say it? Like, I'm kind of struggling to articulate this, and I don't know exactly why. Let me read chat real quick. Hey, Kevin Lasher, welcome in. Bella, nice to have you again. Oh, you've been thinking about the Eclipse a lot lately? Hey, Ponyboy, welcome in. Okay, so in Jarhead's video, they had a kind of timeline that I had some disagreements with, because they were putting the marriage between Radagon and Marika like contemporaneous with when Godwin would have died, but I don't think that works for multiple reasons, namely that Ranni needs to be around to kill Godwin, and the only way Ranni should be around is, well, I guess... Anyway, the biggest issue that I had with it was that Ranni would need to kill Godwin, and in my opinion, Miquella and Malenia would have already need to have been born and kind of grown up well enough to the point to claim their great runes for the Shattering. So his comments here were talking about the potential of Radagon giving the great shards of the rune to the twins, which I have pretty strong disagreements with. So I don't know if, despite having made this comment, Jarhead went back and revised more of their video, because this was like a month ago. Although when you're building a really long video like Jarhead has in store for us, I wouldn't be surprised if it just took that long to produce, to be honest, especially if they have other stuff going on in real life. So I have it highlighted the inherent weaknesses in Jarhead's argument for why Godwin's death could have been before Radagon went to Leyndell, and they wish that they dedicated time to try and strengthen this in their second video, but they'll definitely spend more time focusing on that particular area if they keep making any videos on this idea. And they thanked me for the feedback. So yeah, that was absolutely a class act of what they did. It's just kind of like taking the criticism on the chin. Hopefully they were able to incorporate some of my feedback into the second video, but if they didn't, I will try to keep this in mind that they had already kind of been in the final stages of production, or at the very least like pre-editing. So all right. Kevin asks, do we know for 100% sure that Radagon appeared before the Shattering of the Elden Ring? Yes, because you cannot have the Shattering without Ranni and the other Carian children, because Ranni needs to kill Godwin to initiate the Shattering eventually. Kim Lee, welcome in. Nice to have you. Yeah, and as Errant Vice says, how can the Shattering happen before the event that is stated to have been its catalyst? And that would be when Ranni murdered Godwin, which needs Radagon to be her daddy. Yushun, welcome in. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly or close enough. And Dr. Zayas, nice to see you again. Chabial, welcome back in. Okay, so I just wanted to highlight that little exchange that we had based on my previous reaction before we went into Jarhead's new video about 7 questions for the usurping theory answered.
Radagon is a Numen like Marika. Marika and Radagon are twins. Marika created Radagon. Radagon used to be a part of Marika. Marika was enslaved by Radagon. Radagon was enslaved by Marika. Radagon is a curse from the Fire Giants. Miquella and Malenia are both clones. Marika tried to kill herself by breaking the Elden Ring. Radagon absorbed Marika. Marika absorbed Radagon. Radagon is Marika's secret identity. The Elden Beast pulled Radagon and Marika apart when he was creating the Sacred Relic Sword. Rennala and Radagon have a secret child. The Amber Egg is Rennala and Radagon's secret child. Banal is Rennala and Radagon's secret child. Godwin is Marika and Blasidusax's secret child. Marika and Radagon are the alchemical rebus. Radagon is a misbegotten. Radagon is the hero of Castle Morn. Marika is the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Radagon is one of Marika's shadowbound beasts. Rennala was the cuckoo all along and she's taken over Radagon's body. Radagon is still...
The funny thing is, Rennala does kind of have like a bird type image going along with her crown or whatever you want to call that, like her silly hat.
Still alive somewhere. Marika was bound to Radagon using extreme grafting. The Greater Will bound Radagon to Marika to keep her under control. Radagon is a big parasite made by the Greater Will. Radagon is Marika's mimic tear. Goldmask was going to burn the Erdtree himself. Marika was originally a brunette. And, of course, Radagon is an ant.
Those are some pretty
These were just
good
a few
theories.
of the theories you guys shared with me on my first video. I was absolutely...
Oh god, everybody shared those with him? My condolences, my man. You're having an aneurysm? Yeah, that's how it is. So yeah, his first intro was kind of similar to this. I like the style of these. It's a little bit fast, but I mean, that's just kind of a part of the charm.
blown away that so many of you took the time to share them, and I never expected so many responses. Thank you to everyone, especially those who disagreed with the usurping theory but still went out of your way to share such kind words. They've really meant the world, and all of your thoughts and theories are an amazing resource. They're also a testament to FromSoft's amazing method of world building for there to be such a wide variety of different ideas. One thing's for sure.
Alright, I didn't realize like he had put his own hard-coded subtitles there at the bottom, so I'll just take off the closed captions, which are just really bad.
After a year since Elden Ring's release, there still isn't a single unified theory within the community. Whether Radagon separated with Marika early on, whether they merged into one being after their marriage, or if they were never one being at all, the community is still undecided. And while the infinite scope of speculation is what draws many of us into the FromSoft games, at the moment it feels like we're still missing the full picture. As I expected, you guys pointed out many areas of the lore that I missed in the original video, so I want to follow up on these to try and progress this theory further. I'd highly recommend viewing the first part of this series if you haven't already, but if anyone out there still watches this video first, please let me know how crazy all this will sound. But as a summary, the usurping theory is an alternative interpretation to the message Radagon is Marika. It speculates that Radagon was sent to Leyndell by the Two Fingers to punish Marika for breaking the Elden Ring, and Radagon kept up a facade of order by pretending that Marika was still in control. In doing so, Radagon pretended to be Marika while she was locked inside the Erdtree. Radagon is Marika because everything Marika did after shattering the Elden Ring was actually done by Radagon in disguise. I had so many great discussions with you guys in the comments, and from listening to you guys, I've been able to compile a list of all the most important issues with the usurping theory, and the key areas of the lore I'll need to address for the theory to move forward. So in this video, I want to go through this list to help answer the questions you had for the theory. Thank you to all of you who shared your support and for explaining your thoughts in such amazing detail. Although I'm confident in the foundations for this theory, it must be said that I still could be wrong about many of the aspects of the lore. Whilst going through the lore and thinking about this theory, I've honestly felt that the usurping idea is able to provide a lot of answers to many of the mysteries we're still facing. At the moment, if anyone agrees with only certain aspects of this theory, I feel it's completely fair to take those points from this video and disregard the rest. Your own thoughts and theories are just as important as mine. So please let me know what areas of the video you agree with, and which areas you're still unconvinced. I've also gone through both the English and Japanese.
Alright, so I just wanted to commend Jarhead again for making another good summary of their last video, as well as being like very upfront about the kind of issues that others have raised, and they're trying to address their kind of criticisms. It's not easy to do, and it's definitely a lot harder to do it with such grace, so just want to commend them as a content creator on that front.
These versions for the text for everything I'll cover in this video. I'll also link the translation spreadsheets I've been using, and a huge thank you to those in the Ward Discord community for helping me with lore and translation questions. The DeepL translator you guys directed me to was a great help. If I was stuck using only Google Translate, I'd definitely end up embarrassing myself. And again, a lot of my thoughts and theories have been heavily influenced by many other amazing content creators. Smogetown, the Tarnished Archaeologist, Zulu the Witch, Quaylar, Garrulous Goldmask, Bandit Games, Mad Luigi, Sekiro Doobie, Agent Jake, The Lore Hunter, Zeostorm, Redditos, The Last Protagonist, Cosmos, and of course Vartividya have all been major inspirations for me. So you might recognise some of my approaches to the lore from their content, and I'll specifically link any of the amazing content that I'll talk about in this video. My videos are all about getting some ideas flowing, and it feels like there's a lot of interesting lore that just doesn't fit with the Radagon theory. And as much of the game is still wildly confusing, simply strictly adhering to the Radagon theory, in a way, prevents us from finding some of the overarching connections in the lore. So this is all for fun, and I'm hoping we get a lot of concrete answers when the Shadow of the Erdtree drops. But with all that out of the way, let's start on this list of questions that you guys had for the usurping theory to try and address.
That guy had an amazing pair of lungs. Yeah, no kidding.
So the most commonly raised issue by far with the timeline for the usurping theory was with Miquella and Godwin's apparent close relationship. As many of you pointed out, a lot of evidence is pointing towards them having known each other personally. Godwin might even have been a parental figure for Miquella and Malenia, making his death even more tragic for the twins. If this were true, then most of the usurping theory couldn't even be possible. Specifically, if Radagon first went to Leyndell to enact Marika's grim punishment for shattering the Elden Ring, then Godwin would have already been dead. So if the twins hadn't been born yet, obviously there would have been no chance for them to get to know each other. So I didn't bring up their implied relationship at all in the original video. And as it would mess up the whole timeline for the usurping theory, it really is something I should have included. The change in the timeline was based on the English and Japanese for some of JaR's dialogue, where he clearly says the Night of Black Knives happened during the Golden Age of the Erdtree. And as he claims the Elden Ring closely follows Godwin's death, I was confident this was before Radagon was in Leyndell. But this doesn't acknowledge the implied relationship between Miquella and Godwin, and many of you pointed me towards small details that I'd completely missed before. So there's definitely more to consider, so I'll begin by addressing the evidence found in the game that does imply Miquella and Godwin had a close relationship.
Yeah, this seems like it would be a gigantic hurdle to clear, so I'm definitely interested to see where he's going to go with this. Titan definitely doesn't think that the Two Fingers would use Radagon to usurp. Last time the Two Fingers used Marika to overtake the Gloam-Eyed Queen, so the Two Fingers would probably use Ranni to take over. You do think Radagon did try to usurp after, though? I feel like your last sentence doesn't follow exactly what you were saying a moment ago. So, yeah, the biggest issue with that stuff really just depends on your interpretation of the Gloam-Eyed Queen and whether she had control over the Elden Ring at any point, because technically the Rune of Death should have been integrated into the ring initially at some point. And so if that were to happen with like the time before Marika and Godfrey, that's one thing, but it just becomes a lot more convoluted depending on what is actually true, and we don't know.
As I'm sure you're well aware at this point, VartyVidia's video on the lore of Miquella covers this evidence in amazing detail, so I would recommend giving that a second viewing. But the biggest piece of evidence is found within the description for the Golden Epitaph. A sword made to commemorate the death of Godwin the Golden, the first of the demigods to die, infused with the humble prayer of a young boy, "O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death." With Miquella being forever cursed with an eternal childhood, and as it uses the Haligtree sigil in its weapon skill, he is clearly the obvious candidate for the young boy. Many of you agreed that Miquella likely made this sword soon after Godwin's death. And for this to happen, Radagon and Marika must have already been together for the twins to be present at that time. And I think it's a fair assumption. For Miquella to have honoured Godwin in this way, I think it does make sense that they would have had a close personal bond. Now, alongside the Golden Epitaph, there's also evidence found in this particular statue. Located in the Haligtree, it depicts Miquella and Malenia as children being embraced by an adult figure. And there's been a lot of speculation for this mystery person being Godwin himself.
Yeah, I was wondering if they were going to bring up the statue, and if they didn't, I was definitely going to. So I don't really know how I feel about this figure being Godwin. I do think it is fairly likely, because this doesn't really match the iconography of Marika or any of the other demigod children that we've seen. So Godwin does seem like a good candidate. Like, I can kind of see the argument based off of like the story trailer, but even then it's not like a one-to-one match, I don't believe. Yushin says, to them it always seemed like the Gloam-Eyed Queen had the literal Rune of Death in her possession and it was recovered by Malekith. Yeah, and so that, like, the interpretations about what the Rune of Death is and whether it was integrated and or removed and then later confined into Malekith are just kind of some of the points that we just have a kind of a collective disagreement about as a lore community in general. So we just really need a couple little bits of extra information to really ground a lot of these theories. And I'm not so sure that FromSoft is going to provide them, honestly. Errant Vice says, if the Greater Will's whole plan was to punish Marika and set right the Order, why make a shadow clone before sending the Tarnished to go kill her whole bloodline and put the Order back together? I feel like those are two different things. Like, we don't know when Marika actually got Malekith, and she could have had Malekith for an extremely long time before she ever had a quote-unquote, like, use of her Shadowbound Beast, but, right. The whole issue with the Tarnished is very complexing, and in some ways I don't really like it, because it almost makes it sound as though, like, Marika masterminded her plan before she even, like, fully created the Tarnished. And so, like, she'd kind of already betrayed Radagon with Godfrey. Or I guess, like, can you even really call that a betrayal if in a certain sense she's still kind of sort of loyal to her original husband? Well, or herself. Yeah, it just gets really convoluted, especially depending on your personal interpretation of what Radagon truly is. There's just so many moving parts to the lore. It's really hard to find common ground with, like, the people that you're talking to, because so many people can believe different things but not exactly be wrong, and you might not know exactly that other person's beliefs when you're talking about them, and can very easily end up, like, talking past each other.
Obviously, this would be very compelling evidence for Godwin having personally known and been close to the twins. And although I've tried to gather evidence for who the sculpture could be depicting, to be honest, it is still quite an anomaly. There's a further connection between Godwin and Miquella found in references to the Eclipse, which I'll get to for the second part of this video. So first, with the golden epitaph implying their close relationship, there's a few points I'd like to mention. Points that suggest the sword was both made long after Godwin's death, and call into question that it is implying a close relationship. First, we all know from the incantations that Miquella shared with Radagon that he was definitely a fundamentalist for a time. And we also know that Golden Order fundamentalism was the principal force against those who live in death, who were all directly spawned from Godwin's Deathroot.
Those who live in death fall outside the principles of the Golden Order. Their mere existence sullies the guidance of gold, tainting its truth. And so it is the vermin must be exterminated. Down to the very last.
While Miquella was a fundamentalist, fighting against those who live in death would have certainly been an objective for him as well. And attempting to give Godwin a proper death would certainly put an end to the spread of Deathroot. It also sounds like the perfect Herculean task for a prodigy such as Miquella. Apart from looking extra fancy, using the sword will prevent those who live in death from rising again after killing them. Those who live in death were all born from Godwin's Deathroot, which spread after.
You actually don't even need to use the Sacred Order Ash of War with this spell specifically. This one will buff allies in the vicinity with Sacred Order to automatically kill the those who live in death. So anyway, I'll back it up a little bit.
Apart from looking extra fancy, using the sword will prevent those who live in death from rising again after killing them.
I guess technically he wasn't exactly saying using the Ash of War. I just kind of took it that way because he used it in the footage. Okay.
Those who live in death were all born from Godwin's Deathroot, which spread after Godwin's soulless corpse was interred within the roots of the Erdtree. So it's also fair to presume that Miquella was praying for Godwin's true death to put an end to both his suffering and to put an end to the spread of his Deathroot. The location of the golden epitaph is very interesting to me as well. As Abuza pointed out, it's just sort of hidden away on a random corpse in Arise's hero's grave. This dungeon is filled with basilisks that spit deathblight at us, skeletal militiamen who live in death, more basilisks spitting out more deathblight, an omen that even spits out deathblight, and then a load more basilisks. With the sword being found around so many enemies related.
That's interesting. I didn't remember that the one omen down there spews out deathblight. I'm gonna have to go back down there. Like I've really only gone through most of the catacombs like twice, if even that much, just because Once you go down to Catacomb, like, you kind of know what's there, and you only really need to go to Catacombs if you want something for specific builds. So, yeah, I'll try. Actually, let me make a note of that. Azahir Tomb, Deathblight Omen? Okay.
To the spread of Godwin's Deathroot, it does seem that whoever died wielding the golden epitaph was doing so for defense against this spread. It makes sense that Miquella created the sword to specifically aid in this purpose. But as the Deathroot stemmed from Godwin's soulless body after it was interred in the roots of the Erdtree, it would have taken time for the Deathroot to spread throughout the lands between. So if Miquella made the sword soon after Godwin's death, then the spread of Deathroot had yet to happen. There wouldn't have been a need for him to create weapons and incantations with the power to later rest those who live in death. I feel this is a strong argument for the golden epitaph being made long after Godwin's death. Admittedly, this doesn't mean Miquella and Godwin couldn't have had an early kinship, but at the very least, I think it being made a long while after his death does weaken the idea that it was done so as an emotional response from Miquella, and as such, I think this weakens the idea that they were particularly close. Looking now...
So I would agree that this description doesn't necessarily imply that Miquella made the sword shortly after Godwin's death. There could have been a small period where that happened, to be fair, but it also doesn't disprove the other ideas, which is kind of one of the inherent problems of delving into the lore and meeting interpretations that don't match your own, because very rarely can you directly disprove another theory if you're not using like the game text to go off of, just because so much is left open to interpretation, unfortunately. Skipping a few steps there. Marika's actions removed death, created those who live in death, which then became hated by her very own order. Sort of, like, this is the weird thing, like, in a certain sense, those who live in death, I would argue, kind of existed within the confines of the Golden Order, in that spirit existed as a mortal essence according to Roderica, but I think Marika and everybody within the Golden Order were ignorant of this fact, and it wasn't a problem until Deathroot infused these spirits potentially with the extra will to live, and in so doing caused them to become physically anchored back into the lands between. And so Deathroot is bad because it creates spirits that want to stay alive in the world, and they actually come back physically rather than passing on, because like death has been removed. It's a bit of a headache. So like those who live in death weren't literally around, but like the principle could have existed essentially. Like the spirits were still there, they just were inert, most likely. Yeah, your fundamental assumptions are different than theirs, so you come to different conclusions when talking about the lore like this, indeed. Errant Vice thought those who live in death are those who don't get Erdtree burials. So right, the whole those who live in death thing is kind of made explicitly canon, that they crop up after coming in contact with Deathroot. So I'm trying to think. It should be the Skeletal Militiaman Ashes. Okay, no. The Bandit Ashes. So this is the spirit of a bandit who lives in death and will continue to rise again until properly finished off. After the night of the plot, Deathroot appeared in the lands between, and those who lived in death soon followed. So this is a strong implication that, Deathroot creates those who live in death, but then that much is made confirmed in the Militiaman Ashes, which says, this is the grotesque fate of those who come into contact with Deathroot. So if a spirit essentially gets Deathrooted, it will become anchored into the lands between, and the bones will continue to rise again until they're properly finished off. That's kind of fascinating. Deathroot is more like zombification of life rather than curtailing mortality. So yes and no, and this is kind of like why it's difficult to talk about, because like the spirits are already there, and okay. So the issue is in the lands between, there's like multiple facets to death. So we have bodily death, which is what happens to Ranni when she gets got by the Rune of Death, essentially. Then you have spiritual death, which is what happens with Godwin. So for those who live in death, they probably experienced bodily death at some unknown time beforehand. And then once Deathroot comes into the picture, it snakes into the corpses of everything and most likely comes into contact with that corpse's spirit. And then that spirit kind of gets like the battery juice charge that it needs to be like, oh, wait, I don't want to stay dead. I want to live. And so the spirit becomes the equivalent of the zombie, and then it just reanimates the skeleton, perhaps. What's the chance of Deathroot just literally taking the place left by the soul when it leaves the body? That's a good question, and with the existence of this skeletal militiaman and skeletal bandit ashes, I would say that Deathroot doesn't necessarily replace the soul, because you summon the spirits of these militiamen and bandits to kind of keep them in the lands between, which is kind of really weird to think about, because like if they're those who live in death, how do they leave behind ashes which you can use to call spirits? That's a real headache to try to think about, so I just kind of don't think about it too much, to be quite honest there. This could have been avoided if they simply didn't give Godwin an Erdtree burial. Yeah, they should have burned him, but somebody thought it'd be a good idea to throw away Flame. Alright, going back to the video now.
Now, the rest of its description, it tells us that Miquella made the sword to commemorate the death of Godwin the Golden. The sword being created for a commemoration by Miquella indicates to me that the sword was made for a more formal intention. We can see from its high level of ornamentation that it represents a more ceremonial or ritualistic purpose. And the word commemoration is typically used to describe paying respects to an event of the past. And lastly, the phrasing of Miquella's prayer appears quite cold and distant. Calling Godwin Lord Brother feels much more reverential than familial. That said, the phrase "Oh brother, Lord Brother" is translated from the Japanese "ni-sama." To my knowledge, this is just the respectful word for brother, so it seems like quite the leap to calling your brother Lord. Although this could be...
Yeah, he's kind of right there. I mean, this is a little bit of a distant way to refer to one's older brother, because like this character, Sama, does mean Lord. I'm sure like many weebs in the chat are familiar with that. And so it does literally mean like older brother, and there is the good chance that like Miquella is just kind of speaking, I don't want to say like archaically, humbly would probably be the better word here, because like of their royal status. So he is kind of right, oh brother, Lord Brother, but I get what they're doing with the localization here, just to try to preserve some of that societal status type distance that's present in the Japanese. So I think this is actually a really good localization overall, to be honest.
Respectful word for brother, so it seems like quite the leap to calling your brother Lord. Although this could be argued to be hinting at a distance between Miquella and Godwin, it is equally plausible for Miquella to have reverence and respect towards him, especially if he really was a strong father figure for the twins. So this doesn't really help my case, as it can be argued for either, I think. But with all this in mind, I have...
In some ways, you could argue that it can help his case that they shouldn't be that close if he refers to him as like Ni-sama, because that is a little bit distant. But like I said a moment ago, like this is one of those things where it doesn't necessarily mean that. It could just be like Miquella speaking a bit formally, because it's written on Godwin's epitaph, so like people would know that it it's a public facing thing. So there's kind of a sense of propriety kept within the language that Miquella is using, most likely.
have to disagree that the golden epitaph was made soon after the Night of Black Knives and Godwin's death, And in actuality, I don't think the sword gives us much evidence for an early kinship between Miquella and Godwin. Its description just doesn't seem like strong evidence for an implied close relationship. I think it makes more sense that Miquella would have created the Golden Epitaph just to commemorate his brother's death. And the reason for doing so was, in part, to seek an end to both the spread of Godwin's Deathroot and to fight against those who live in death. And as Miquella is often characterised as quite the compassionate individual, and as Godwin's body looks pretty miserable, I think it's only natural for Miquella to yearn for his brother's suffering to end. Now, there's still the statue in the Haligtree. Many people have investigated this statue and have reached the conclusion that the person likely depicted with the twins here is Godwin. Well, the statue's delicate crown is notably different from those worn by Marika and Radagon. There's no hint of a bosom, suggesting it's not Marika, and they have wavy unbraided hair, which is very different from Radagon's. There has always been a signature hair braid in all depictions of Radagon and Marika, so it would be unusual for this statue to depict either of them without it. It's almost impossible to compare the statue with Godwin, as there's sadly very few depictions of him in the game. We only have one still from the intro cinematic, where Godwin has beachy wavy long hair, the shots in the story trailer of Godwin post-shank with more silky smooth hair, and lastly, Godwin's malformed mermaid body, which still has vestiges of long matted blonde hair. Comparing these is very tricky. In my opinion, the closest match to the statue is in the story trailer, showing Godwin's straight blonde hair, but none of these show him wearing a crown at all, let alone the one he wears in the statue. To me, this crown is...
It's kind of funny because I feel like you could say, well, it also doesn't show him wearing a shirt in this one, but yeah.
Show him wearing a crown at all, let alone the one he wears in the statue. To me, this crown is very similar to the ones worn by Malenia and Miquella in their statues. As an aside, it's interesting how different Miquella's hair is depicted here from the intro cinematic, where the undulating crown he wears is sort of similar to his intricate hair braids. And these unique braids are a perfect match to the mysterious individual in the Shadow of the Erdtree poster, which is very compelling for this person being Miquella. But again, both differ a lot, so I feel this helps the idea that the hair in the statues isn't a great identifier. Another quick side note, it really confuses me that Radagon has blonde hair in all of his statues. This is...
So people say that, but I feel like that's just the representation of the statue itself. Like, I would not say that this is blonde. I think it's just like a limitation of it being a sculpture rather than anything else.
The same one in the capital that transforms into Marika, so I could argue that this shows Radagon slipping in his disguise in front of the sculptor, like he forgot to turn off the blonde and the sculptor noticed. It's more likely FromSoft just being inconsistent, but again, here we see the statues aren't always accurate.
And you could make the argument that they may have actually painted this red, like the starker color could have been the red that's like still reminiscent, and the other stuff got like eroded away over time. But yeah, it's just arguable, but I really don't think we have any inclination to believe that Radagon had blonde hair, because we're told how he despaired at his red locks, and we only ever see depictions of him with red hair. So with all that being said, I suppose there is technically a chance for him to have had golden blonde hair at some point, but we never really have anything textual. So I feel like this is just kind of a misreading of a statue, just because statues tell no tales, I guess. I don't know.
Anyway, whilst the Haligtree statue could be hinting towards Godwin being close to the twins, I have to argue that this is just speculation at this point. We do know that Radagon did have a close relationship with Miquella from the fundamentalist incantations they were sharing with each other. But while I've been trying to find any clues, I haven't yet found anything that gives more information on who this individual is. Personally, I'm interested in FromSoft's choice of putting these red leaves creeping over the trio. The red colour could be symbolising the Scarlet Rot, if the figure on the left is Malenia. Similarly, the red colour could be symbolising the parentage of Radagon, if the adult figure is indeed Radagon. Or this could be nothing at all. FromSoft has been conditioning us to search for meaning in every small detail, but I've not seen anyone mention these red leaves before. In any...
Okay, I kind of want to rewatch that, because I, like, literally this weekend I was doing a lot of tree leaf theory, and I've got some pretty strong Pepe Ofnir thoughts about that down over here. And I'll probably devote like a full video to it, or at least like a small video. So let me just back up, because I want to like pay attention to that again.
Trying to find any clues, I haven't yet found anything that gives more information on who this individual is. Personally, I'm interested in FromSoft's choice of putting these red leaves creeping over the trio. The red colour could be symbolising the Scarlet Rot, if the figure on the left is Melania. Similarly, the red colour could be symbolising the parentage of Radagon, if the adult figure is indeed Radagon. Or this could be nothing at all. FromSoft has been conditioning us to search for meaning.
Okay, so yeah, I guess I'll spill the beans a little bit. Just in general, there are going to be red leaves all over the Haligtree, and I think part of the reason for it is because the Haligtree doesn't really have full lineage from the Erdtree, or at least like it's not taking in gold, and therefore because it's not taking in gold, it is not becoming more orange or more yellow as a byproduct of that process. And red leaves seem to be a thing that is due to lack of the Erdtree's influence and or the lack of actually absorbing souls within it. And so part of the reason why I've been looking into this is because Loki had a new essay on his website that like talks about a bunch of things, and he talked about trees and that there were like red colored leaves in Fair Missoula, and I think Tarnished Archaeologist talked about like the trees for a bit, and it's been on my radar to like go like do a deep dive into trees for a while, but I just hadn't really done it because it's kind of a pain in the ass. Well, that kind of finally lit the fire under my ass to go look into this a bit more, and preliminary findings, take all of this speculation with a grain of salt and whatnot, but from my research, I have noticed that when you get near a minor Erdtree, let me, hold on, pull up some screenshots. The minor Erdtrees actually seem to be affecting the color of the leaves that are near the trees, like the color of the leaves of the trees nearby, with a couple exceptions here. So, all right. Okay, nope, not this one. Okay, this should be good. In Liurnia of the Lakes, we have a couple different types of trees. Normally, you'll have like this kind of yellowish leafed tree throughout the Lands Between, and you'll have like conifers with like a kind of deep orange color, which I'll touch upon that in a moment here. But the closer you get to an Erdtree, you'll get a more vibrant yellow color and a more vibrant orange color. So I think that's supposed to tie into how the minor Erdtrees and the Erdtree itself have like golden leaves. And so like the more gold it has, the more like vibrant it becomes, like orange and yellow versus like the Stolar faded yellow. And that's not like the best example, but one thing that I noticed in Lane Dell itself is that we actually have a couple trees with the older style red leaves. So these red leaves don't seem to connect to the Erdtree like I was saying with like the Haligtree, and we find them in places like Fair Missoula. So we also have like green leaves, and I'll leave those alone. I also don't feel like these are affected by the Erdtree, because green leaves are actually really, really rare in the Lands Between, believe it or not. Obviously, there are going to be some areas where they're like more common, but they're less common overall. We've got like the yellowy orange conifer type trees in Fair Missoula as well. So just keep that in mind for now. And let me pull up the last images here, which are going to be important. Okay, so within Lane Dell itself, next to the fortified manor specifically, you have the older style of tree, even though these are deciduous trees, like not pine cone trees or not pine trees, which have like the deep orange reddish hue, which you can kind of find in common with the trees in Fair Missoula. So I'll just pull these ones up. So yeah, these look almost identical. This is like where all the worm faces are. Obviously, there's more lighting over here, so it looks more orange, but generally they're the same color. So Yeah. And like I was saying like a couple times now, the Haligtree seems to fall in line with this. And there's even a couple of graveyard areas in the Haligtree which have this kind of stuff going on with it. Is this the Haligtree area? No, that's the Lindell. Okay, yeah, but this is an important tree, the one that I wanted to show up next. So there is also another graveyard in Lindell itself, and we have a Those Who Live in Death corpse hanging from the tree. So this kind of really cemented it in my mind that these trees must not really be taking in the souls of the dead like the Erdtree does, because they have Those Who Live in Dead hanging off of them. So in Fair Missoula, we also have a tree with like a bunch of beastmen in it. It has like the red coloration and all that. I'm kind of repeating myself ad nauseum at this point, but I do want to show like the Haligtree one, which I'm pretty sure I still don't have labeled yet. Oh yeah, these are like the Haligtree leaves. And where's the graveyard? Is this it? Nope, that's Loretta's place. So yeah, there's red leaves all over here. Even the minor Erdtrees still do have like reddish ferns and ivy growing up on them. And then once I find the damn place, okay. So this is L-File, and these are kind of like old dying trees, but you can still see that they have like the very deep, maybe not like very deep, but like the reddish hue on their leaves. And then this is like way down below by like all the rot dudes and the Haligtree Knights. And so that's kind of my train of thought on this for now. I'm kind of curious to hear your guys' thoughts in chat, because like this is something that I've been like thinking about this weekend, and I think it's worthy enough a topic for its own video. So I just kind of spilled the beans. So do me a solid and don't release my video before me. I don't know. All right. So I'll scroll back up a bit. Oh yeah, and we talked about like the statues potentially being painted and then like the paint fading. And like Greek statues were apparently like super garish, as Teen Seth was saying, as well as sarcastic. And welcome back to the stream, Sarcastic. El Gusto says, maybe all holy sculptures are like in gold monochrome to represent the Golden Order. Maybe. And red is associated with the Crucible too, closer to the source or primordial. Oh yeah, I don't know why I like didn't actually voice that thought. So one other idea I had in conjunction with the whole like reddish minor Erdtree orange type leaves here is if the Erdtree became disconnected from its roots, does that mean the minor Erdtrees are disconnected from like the Golden Order's Erdtree? And if so, do the trees next to these minor Erdtrees tend to resemble the primordial Crucible trees in their leaves? Because this orange color is arguably of a redder hue than the normal like light yellow trees. So this is kind of another like vantage thing. So like I would say that this is kind of a normal style leaf in the lands between. And then when you get closer to this Erdtree itself, they become a more vivid, vibrant orange and have like more of a red hue. And so if you like zoom in on the tree, we get some more of like the red ivy, which is kind of what Jarhead was talking about. Fair Missoula is so visually striking, but you hate running around it so much. Yeah. I've got like multiple saves, and I finally just like went back and made my most recent saves, like, so I didn't have to keep running around, and so I could just go to warps immediately and all that. Tony Pepperoni, welcome back in. Godfrey and Godwin both have red leaves on their clothes. It's not red, they are kind of gold. I'll show those off in a moment here, but it's only a little bit of red, mainly gold. You wonder if it means the Crucible had red leaves too. I don't know if they're red. I'm kind of inclined to think that they're probably more of this orange color, because I'm getting the vibe is that non-Erdtree type leaves are like actually more red in color. Hey Jimmy, welcome into the stream. What are we studying? We're talking about Jarhead's video about the usurpation theory of Elden Ring, in that Radagon could have usurped Marika's body. And I'm just going off on this big tangent about mostly unrelated tree lore because he'd mentioned red style vines growing on the statue in LFIL with Miquella, Melania, and potentially Godwin / Marika / question mark. Kevin says, do red leaves represent being stuck in the fall season, unable to proceed to winter or death, and then birth or spring? Maybe. That's actually a really good thought that I'll probably need to consider a bit more. I don't really know, because typically orange leaves are also representative of autumn and whatnot. And we do have like green trees elsewhere, and that would also be needed to fit into the equation here. And I guess I might as well talk about that now, that one of the more mind-boggling things that I noticed in Liurnia specifically when I was just looking at the trees is that... Okay. When you look at the trees in the lake, they're all filled with green leaves, and if you like ignore the crappy low poly models here, it's not too important. But all of the trees on land that are like larger have the yellow style branches, and like not branches, but the yellow leaves. So like the shrubbery is still like kind of green in places, but it's very clear that when you're on land, you've got yellow trees, and like conifers will show up elsewhere and whatnot. And maybe I should show that one. Anyway. So even underground, the trees are still yellow in some places, which is not what I would have expected. Obviously, Nokron has like the silver trees and whatnot, or like silver vines and whatever you want to call them. Kimley got the impression these autumn colors occur because life is setting in the lands between. It's sort of a vital twilight. So I was kind of under the impression that Caelid was probably a land of greenery before the Scarlet Rot happened, but after going, I mean, this doesn't fully tie into your comment, but it will potentially in the greater scheme of things, that when you look at Castle Redmane and the northern half of Caelid where the Dragon Barrow is, where the dragons are said to have like fled from the Scarlet Rot, Redmane Castle itself still has some trees. Some are dying or like already dead, kind of. And these ones have not been touched by the Scarlet Rot because it seems as though the flame has kept the Scarlet Rot at bay, because the other half of the bridge has the trees that are eaten by Scarlet Rot. So it seems like they did defend Castle Redmane. And then the Castle Redmane trees are all like yellow-leaved. So I've wondered whether or not Caelid could have just kind of looked like this originally, like the Caelid Wilds. And so that's just kind of one thought that I've had. So I don't know if it's all meant to be a perpetual autumn or not, because we do have some green-leaved trees, and it doesn't make much sense for the pine trees to have yellow and orange leaves. And I guess I should show off like Altus Plateau just for like reference. So yeah, in Altus Plateau, the coniferous type trees have very, very bright yellow trees, like yellow leaves rather. And so do all of the other trees, which I guess I didn't bring this up, which is you guys are like just missing a piece of the puzzle. So all of Altus Plateau, even the grass, is just completely coated in yellow and gold, which makes me think this is more of the Leyndell giant Erdtree influenced flora, I guess. So maybe that might help contextualize some of my thoughts here. We also have examples of the red plants being cultivated and compared to blood with the arteria leaves. Yeah. So maybe your thought with the Haligtree was it being more related to that. And that makes sense. But then it does call into question the random trees next to the fortified manor and the one graveyard in Lower Leyndell. Sacrificial buds, true. Sacramental. Yeah. If you consider the Elden Ring cinematics to be canon, then the Melania and Radon fight shows the land and sky look red already. That's true. So maybe there's like something going on with the spice in Caelid. G6BR, welcome back into the stream. You don't know if it's worth considering, but Jar Martin said in an interview he was asked to write the story of the game like 5,000 years ago. So when did From insert their lore like 1,000 years before the game starts? Yeah, so I think people take the 5,000 years thing a bit literally. I think it just means like a long time ago. But yeah, as far as those interviews go, Miyazaki did say that he wanted, in some ways, George to be surprised at what would befall like his demigods that he like made the backstories for. So yeah, it's really weird how much he contributed, because it doesn't actually seem to me that a lot of those things made it to the final game. And I feel like Miyazaki is just probably like fanboying out and giving him like a lot of credit that might not have influenced the final build of the game. And part of the reason why I say that, for anybody who may not know, is in 1.00, like the unpatched version of the game, there are a lot of different item descriptions, and one of the most uncanny to me is that Morgott is described as the Elden Lord. And so in any world where Morgott was the Elden Lord yet is now no longer one, just screams to me that George R.R. Martin's world building must not have been like that influential on the final build of the game, but ultimately we don't know, which is real fun trying to figure all that out. Gold is like the harvest season, perpetual bounty, and ripe wheat is gold. Yes. So like not all like yellow does show like an ending of things, but I mean it does for like a lot of stuff as well. Like leaves changing color and turning yellow is pretty autumnal, but you are right with the wheat and stuff. Okay. So yeah, these are kind of my preliminary thoughts about tree lore for now. So I do wonder whether or not the minor Erdtrees influence the trees around them. And this one's dead, so it doesn't really matter. And everything I think in the Altus Plateau is more or less being influenced by the big Erdtree, which is why we have like such golden leaves and whatnot. Whereas everything else is duller, which kind of goes in line with the whole tarnished sunflower description, or the faded Erdleaf, where like they came from the leaves of the Erdtree that fell in antiquity. And so we have Liurnia with some like green trees and all that. And I guess I should show you guys some conifers that aren't super yellow as well, just to strengthen my point. So these are the ones in Fair Missoula, which isn't like the best for my point right now, but just to give you like a base reference point. This is Shifra River, and because of the lighting, they look like blue or gray, but they're still like reddish. And we have the yellow trees underground, which I'd mentioned. So just keep that in mind. Now here's Liurnia, and this is what the conifers look like here. And we've got like the yellow trees and a little bit of the green like shrubbery type tree as well. So Liurnia in some ways seems to be influenced by the Erdtrees the least. And just to kind of shoot myself in the foot a little bit about the minor Erdtrees influencing the trees around them, the one in Limgrave doesn't really seem to be affecting the trees around it that much. And I've wondered whether or not that's because... Let's get the picture. Do I not have it labeled yet? Oh, no, I'm just blind. Okay. So yeah, these trees don't really seem to be influenced by this minor Erdtree too strongly. And I wonder if that's because this minor Erdtree didn't have any jars brought to the bottom of it, which might have contributed to these ones being faded. But this minor Erdtree still does have leaves, which I don't really know what to make of that. Hey, Without Horns, welcome back in. Teen Sith's mostly a death of the author type person, and She doesn't really find it interesting to try and suss out who is contributing to what and what they were intending, to be honest. Yeah, I definitely follow that train of thought, but I do like to try to entertain all possibilities when I can, and it is kind of one of those recurring questions, so I figure it's worth addressing. Okay, going back to the video after this really off-topic tangent.
In every small detail, but I've not seen anyone mention these red leaves before. In any case, we simply can't confirm who this individual is. I feel there's equal argument for either Radagon or Godwin, but we can't know for certain. Sorry to Vidya, as I know this theory is a particular favourite of his, and the fan art for Godwin caring for the twins has been really incredible. So I hope I won't...
Oh, right. So I did want to show off the flowers on Godwin and Godfrey. All right, so this design is what's on the Crucible Siluria Tree Knight set, and this is on Godwin's robe. So if you rotate it, they kind of match up. Oops, hold on, let me pull these back up. We don't need those leaves. So I think if you mirror this, it works. All right, I guess I need to open Paint 3D or something. Let's do that. And this design also does appear on Godfrey / Horaloo's cape. So hopefully this might look a little bit better. Maybe it's upside down still. It's kind of hard to tell. So these ones might not match up, which I'm a little bit questionable or skeptical about. But it's very abundantly clear that it's kind of the same thing that's on Godfrey's cloak here. And it's kind of hard to make out, but it is the same thing. I think somebody on Reddit may have noticed this a while back, and I kind of forgot about it, but then I noticed it again recently, and I was like, oh, okay. All right, and so Colo, you wanted to see the roots of the Erdtree where Godwin is, the leaves on those trees specifically, or just anything like that? Because I do have pictures of that. They look like Miranda flowers a little bit, maybe not entirely. Let me pull some of these up for you guys. All right, so underneath the Erdtree in the Deeproot depths, we have this faded orange color for the roots. So let me zoom out for you guys. So these are the normal trees, and they have the normal yellow color. Some are a little bit green. Yeah, the shrubs and whatnot, but that's not too big a deal. But when you look at the actual Erdtree roots themselves, this one. Okay, so that's not the leaves. But you can tell that these are supposed to be Erdtree roots because they've got gold in them, I think. They kind of remind me of the Two Fingers, to be honest. This stuff right there. That's not the best vantage. All right, so yeah, this is a little bit better. So you can see these are kind of a more vivid gold color than what's going on with these ones. So it is possible that once the Erdtree became disconnected from its roots, the roots started to lose a lot of their gold color, I guess. Although it kind of seems backwards to me, honestly. And so they started to fade. I don't entirely know what to make of that yet. Fear the botanical lore. Okay. Maybe it's heraldry for the golden lineage then? Maybe. I don't think Godric actually has that design on him, and he should still be golden lineage, I guess. No, I don't think so. Okay. I would need to double check. I'm pretty sure not, but I don't know for sure.
be upsetting anyone by casting doubt on the statue depicting Godwin. But all in all, after going through the fine details for the golden epitaph and the Haligtree statue, I am still unconvinced they are hinting towards a strong emotional connection between Miquella and Godwin. I don't think Miquella would have needed a close relationship with Godwin for him to wish him a true death. And to me, there's a strong implication that the golden epitaph was made long after the Night of Black Knives, once the Deathroot had spread and given rise to those who live in death. At the very least, even if they did have a relationship, I don't think this is evidence for them being particularly close. The Eclipse is the other area of the lore that implies a connection between Godwin and Miquella. The foundation of this revolves around Miquella's apparent plans to restore Godwin's soul via a ritual involving an eclipse. There are very few, very small mentions of the eclipse in the lore, and there are truly no actual explanations or any details of what this supposed ritual would even involve. With so little information, it's not really an area I felt confident to speculate on, but many of you have seen a connection between Miquella and restoring Godwin's soul, which would indicate a pretty strong connection. So I'll try and detail this connection, but I want to underline that we can't know for sure, unless more details are explained in the DLC, that is. But going forward, I think the key question to keep in mind is, if Miquella was trying to restore Godwin's soul, why would he want to do so in the first place? So mention of an eclipse is reserved for a handful of weapons and talking spirits. First, there's the Eclipse Crest heater shield. The sun in Eclipse is said to be the symbol of the wandering mausoleums, where the soulless demigods slumber. These mausoleums are found across the lands between, and they house the bodies of the other soulless demigods. Although it's never confirmed, I think these are likely the demigods that fell after Godwin during the Night of Black Knives. We learn here that the sun in Eclipse is meant to be the symbol for these mausoleums, and they are often guarded by mausoleum knights. These knights have decapitated themselves to follow their masters into death. Some of them carry the Eclipse Crest Great Shield, which tells us that the eclipsed sun, drained of colour, is the protective star of the soulless demigods. It aids the mausoleum knights by keeping destined death at bay. So, these knights are protecting their soulless masters inside the mausoleums by keeping destined death at bay. And the eclipse is both the symbol of the mausoleums and a protective star that somehow aids the knights in protecting them. I've heard people say the phrase protective star might be implying an outer god of some kind, but there's no other mention of a protective star to work with, so I've not got much to add to that. But to me, the purpose of the knights keeping destined death at bay means two things. First, they are stopping the soulless bodies from truly dying, hoping that their souls can one day be restored. This is supported by the spirit ashes for the leader of the Mausoleum Knights, Luta the Headless, who sacrificed her life so that, in death, she could continue to protect a soulless demigod until the revival, earning her the hero's honour of Erdtree burial. As an aside, it's interestingly a bit unclear if she earned Erdtree burial because her master had already been resurrected, or if her sacrifice alone earned her this right.
So this is actually made explicit in the Japanese and really surprised me, and I learned about this fairly recently, that her demigod should have already revived according to this description. So let's go ahead and make it bigger. So we've got Lutel here, and so where is her soulless demigod? Okay, so this character, or these characters, Saitan is like rebirth. So the present verb ending that you would put on this would be like suru. So like Saitan suru is to like be reborn. But to put it into past tense, you have Saitan shita or shita. So it's very, very clear that the soulless demigod was rebirthed at that time. And then as a hero, she was conferred like tree return, so like Erdtree burial. Why do they need to do that if destined death is sealed? That's a excuse me. That's a very good question, and I wondered whether or not they were worried about Malekith going on a rampage and like killing them completely. So if they're cursed, they can't die to destined death, maybe, which is a very contentious claim. But I did want to mention that in case it was unclear on Jarhead's part, which I don't really blame them for, the not skeleton, but like the ghost-like mausoleum soldiers technically do have souls, and it's the demigods within their mausoleums that are the soulless ones. Kevin thinks the eclipse has something to do with Renala and Rani. An eclipse is when the moon blocks out the sun. Yes, and that is something that I've thought as a possibility for a while as well.
The Japanese for her spirit ashes seems to imply more firmly that they had been resurrected.
True.
I don't know, to be honest, as it's never mentioned again. Maybe one of Godfrey's ancestors were resurrected, and maybe this made them so weak they used grafting to regain power. With such little detail, we have to remember to be careful in seeking meaning where there truly isn't evidence to back it up.
I think he may have meant to say Godric, because like Godric was on the screen then, rather than Godfrey's ancestors.
And maybe this made them so weak they used grafting to regain power. With such little detail, we have to remember to be careful in seeking meaning where there truly isn't evidence to back it up. No matter.
Alright, so Kim says the moon is immensely larger than the sun, though. Yes, and that's a good point to bring up. Let me go ahead and pull up a picture for you guys, just to kind of give a bit of a sense of scale here. So here's the Erdtree. This little dot over here is the sun, and this big ass moon is the moon, obviously. Well, one of them. So how the hell could we have a kind of a normal style eclipse if the moon is this close and the sun is like that far away and that small? There might be a hint that the sun could have had more power and therefore maybe it was bigger in the past, or maybe like the moon's power has grown. We don't really know, which is always vexing. So, right. That I think is a very good question though, because they certainly don't match up. Now, we are told in the Warming Stone description that in the past, the Erdtree's rays were as warm and as gentle as the sun. So maybe the sun was bigger back then. Maybe it is all meant to actually predate the Erdtree with the realm of the sun, with the realm of the sun shield, talking about the seed of the sun being like faded away and the country like no longer existing. So we just don't really know. Puzzleheaded says, if the sun drained of color is the protective star of the soulless, then what kind of star is the opposite eclipse? So maybe I should, before like trying to answer that, which I don't know if I have an answer for, to be honest, I think the idea of the sun being drained by the moon is meant to evoke the imagery of becoming tarnished, because to be tarnished is to be quote unquote like faded in Japanese. I guess, pun intended. Let's go ahead and protective star. So in the Eclipse Crest Great Shield, we have this expression which says it's like lost its colors, lost its color essentially. So the term for like losing color, or one of the terms, is like iro aseru, which is what a tarnished is called. So it's not like an actually like one-to-one, oh yeah, this word is exactly the same, but I mean, the concept is certainly carried over between the descriptions. So, oh wait, no. Iro aseru, does this really show up anywhere else? Because the tarnished are called like asebito. And this next color, like iro is color, and then aseru is to like fade, so like faded color, and so like asebito are like faded ones, aka tarnished ones. So aristocrat garb talks about, where are we at? I'm blind. Okay, so it's terribly faded. Okay, oops. So the garb that they wear is got like the fine golden embroidery, but it's terribly faded and tattered, which, you know, isn't that big a deal, but that does show like gold can fade, I guess. The tarnished golden... Oh yeah, the sunflower, of course. So I think this is probably the biggest indication that there is supposed to be a connection between the tarnished and like colors being faded. So the tarnished golden sunflower says that even though like it's already wilted and its color is lost or like faded, it has a holy essence remaining within it. So I think that's supposed to describe the tarnished to a T. And like this second character is what's used in the tarnished terminology. So what does that go back into with like the Eclipse stuff? All right. So the protective star. If the sun gets drained and kind of loses its golden luster, and that's allowing these mausoleum spirits to stay in the lands between, is that analogous to what's going on with the tarnished, and that they've lost their golden luster and can't fully die either? Maybe. So what kind of star is the opposite of the eclipse? Maybe when you have the moon get eclipsed. I don't know. Okay, going back to the video.
So how fun it is. But back to keeping Death and Death at bay, I think it also means the act of preventing the spread of Deathroot from the soulless bodies. Just as Godwin did when he was buried at the roots of the Erdtree, surely the other bodies have the potential to spread Deathroot as well. And maybe, after interring Godwin failed to put his body to rest, and it began the spread of Deathroot through the roots of the Erdtree, they could have learned to isolate the bodies instead inside the mausoleums. This would explain exactly why they are present in the lands between, and why the knights continue to protect them. They are preventing anyone from tampering with the bodies, which could spread Death and Death further through more Deathroot. So how does this relate to Miquella? Well,
right, I don't necessarily know if the soulless bodies within the mausoleums would have Deathroot, and I would probably try to argue against it, because to me, Deathroot only infects things that still have souls. But I guess it is spread within the soulless body of Godwin, so maybe there is some reason behind the madness here.
Well, we know that he was a fundamentalist, and we also know he was an amazing prodigy. It makes sense that Miquella was using his intellect and skill to try and put an end to the spread of Deathroot, and that means he was trying to solve the problem of Godwin's soulless corpse. It's crucial that the symbol of the eclipse is said to have aided this endeavour, but we simply aren't told how. Well, we can learn more about the eclipse itself within Castle Sol. The place is covered with eclipse crests, and at its centre we find the Church of the Eclipse, where we find a spooky talking ghost. O great sun, frigid son of Sol, surrender yourself to the eclipse. Grant life to the soulless bones. And at the top of the castle, looking down over the Haligtree, we can find another spooky ghost calling out to Miquella himself. Lord Miquella, forgive me, the sun has not been swallowed. Our prayers were lacking, your comrade remains soulless. I will never set my eyes upon it now, your divine Haligtree. Here's the big connection between Miquella and some sort of eclipse restoring life back to the soulless. It undeniably links them together, but it is the only mention of granting life to the soulless in the entire game. A few lines from two ghosts inside Castle Sol. One hinting that the sun surrendering to the eclipse would grant life to the soulless, and one asking for Miquella to forgive him for the sun not being swallowed and for his comrade remaining soulless. I think these two spirits provide all of the speculation that the eclipse is a ritual to restore Godwin's soul. We can infer from these two spirits that the swallowing of the sun might have been an actual event, and we can infer it might have restored a soul to someone. This link is undeniable, but we do not have anything else to work with. We can try and break down the text to analyse this link, and from this I've been having thoughts on the phrase, the sun has not been swallowed. Whilst it's fair to read this as an eclipse that never happened, I've always thought the phrase could alternatively be more of a metaphor. If the eclipse is the symbol that aided the Mausoleum Knights in keeping Death and Death at bay, then it represents the sealing of Death and Death. So if the sun in the eclipse means sealing Death and Death, then the sun not being swallowed could describe Death and Death not being sealed. If sealing away Death and Death was the goal, then it clearly hasn't happened. The spread has not been prevented. And as a fundamentalist, Miquella wanted to contain the spread of Death and Death, which has clearly failed. This is how I've always thought about it. But again, with such little to go on, all of your opinions are just as valid as mine.
So there's a lot that ties into this. I want to back it up a little bit just to get my chain of thought in line again. All right, so, oh, damn it, what did I just do? 3. That's what I get. That's what I get No, I think we're too far. Maybe not far enough. Okay. Anyway, so what was I going to say about that? All right, the whole metaphor thing. All right, so first I'll talk about the two dialogues of the ghosts, which talk about granting rebirth to the soulless bones. The Japanese for it is a little bit different for both of these ghosts, where rather than saying like the soulless bones, he could be saying like the soulless husk, which is kind of a more of a clear indication that he could be talking about Godwin. And then the other ghost on top of the roof, where they say that they have yet to see, or they will not be able to see the Haligtree. The Japanese doesn't necessarily use like a first person pronoun here to signify that this ghost is referring to themselves being unable to see the Haligtree. And they could be saying that by being unable to swallow the sun with the eclipse, that Godwin, the real comrade, may not be able to set their eyes on the Haligtree. But it is ultimately ambiguous, because why would anything ever be a matter of fact in a FromSoft game? So, right. St. Trina, wanted to welcome you back in. Nice to see you again. And then the next thing that's worth talking about is the metaphorical connection between the Eclipse and Godwin. So the fact that he mentions like the Eclipse being swallowed, let me look that up real quick. Sun, maybe swallowed would be faster if I could type. All right. So in this passage, Lord Miquella, forgive me, the sun has not been swallowed, our prayers were lacking, your comrade remained soulless. I will never set my eyes upon it now, your divine Haligtree. The characters for swallowed here are kind of a double entendre. I'm like struggling for like the actual terminology here, because this character does literally mean to be eclipsed. However, the way that it's being described here is localized accurately, that it's like swallowed or eaten by bugs. And as far as like FromSoft games go, this character specifically, Mushibamu, is used very often to describe curses and things being eaten away. This is something that is very strictly related to, maybe not strictly, is very clearly related to Godwin in Deathroot, or in the way that Deathroot eats away at things. And so Mushibamu talks about, let's go ahead and look this up. So we've already got it copied. It'll show up in like the Weathered Dagger and a couple other things. Oh yeah, so like I did mention like worm eaten. So it will show up in like rot pots and the roped fly pots, because they like get eaten away by stuff. So Remembrance of the Lich Dragon is more or less corrupted, as I think they call it in English. Yeah, its only reward was corruption. And yeah, that's kind of a reference to like the Godwin aspect of like eating away at Fortisax with Deathroot. Acid Spray Mist is not important. Death Lightning also uses it. So it's like eaten by death is what the lightning is, kind of. Or like, well, that was actually a reference to Fortisax. I take that back. The Night Maiden's Mist is a different thing, but it does use the same character because it's eating away at the life essence of what it comes into contact with. Smaragd. Oh, they're also corrupted or eaten away by Glintstone? Ooh. Huh. I'll need to file that one away for later thoughts. So this is the Weathered Dagger, which I wanted to talk about. This is the item that Fia gives you to kind of kick off her quest line. So she's like, hey, buddy, show this to that idiot D so that way I could Deathroot him, essentially. Which she does, and he dies. And so the reason why D gets triggered is that he knows that this dagger belonged to his little brother. And with it being eroded away by Deathblight, it shows that his brother got. And so he wants to go rescue him, because like that's also what happens to Roger. And then like Fia takes advantage of the situation, I guess, and gets the big bro. Kimley says, comrade is such a weird term. Doesn't it imply Miquella was actively working with Godwin towards something? Yes. And so that's what I was going to bring up next, that with all of these references to the Eclipse kind of coinciding with the terminology that's used to describe the way that Godwin deathbites things, there is a kind of connection with Miquella needing an Eclipse to tie into whatever is going on with Godwin, perhaps. And then, as you said here, Godwin potentially being called a comrade could show a bit of a closer relationship between the two, which Jarhead is against. But I do feel as though this is important context for other people to have in mind, and that they really could be more explicitly connected, maybe not explicitly, more implicitly connected in the Japanese side of the game text here. You never got explained the version of the D story? Okay, yeah, no problem. Glad to elaborate for you. All right, going back to the video here. I think I covered everything.
The Eclipse is a ritual to restore Godwin's soul. We can infer from these two spirits that the swallowing of the sun might have been an actual event, and we can infer it might have restored a soul to someone. This link is undeniable, but we do not have anything else to work with. We can try and break down the text to analyze this link, and from this, I've been having thoughts on the phrase, the sun has not been swallowed. Whilst it's fair,
I'm gonna speed up a little bit because I went too far back. Could be more of a metaphor. So yeah, I do think it is a metaphor, but it is a kind of a direct one.
Sealing destined death, then the sun sealing of destined death. So if the sun in eclipse means sealing destined death, then the sun not being swallowed could describe destined death not being sealed. If sealing away destined death was the goal, then it clearly hasn't happened. The spread has not been prevented. And as a fundamentalist, Miquella wanted to contain the spread of destined death, which has clearly failed. This is how I've always thought about it. But again, with such little to go on, all of your opinions are just as valid as mine. The last mention of the Eclipse is found within the legendary weapon for Castle Sol, the Eclipse Shuttle. Storied sword and treasure of Castle Sol that depicts an eclipsed sun.
I like the little visual imagery we've got going on here. I appreciate that.
Drained of colour. In Sol, the sight of an eclipse inspires a dreadful awe, preventing an onlooker from averting his gaze. This reinforces the eclipse being an event that actually happens in the lands between, but doesn't explain what's so terrifying about it. But the unique skill for the shuttle is very interesting to me. Casting imbues the blade with the Prince of Death's flames, inflicting the death ailment upon foes. Attacks inflict deathblight on enemies, and casting a second time will trigger a deathblight explosion. Somehow, it's captured Godwin's deathblight and can draw it out. Harnessing the Prince of Death's flames would be a powerful tool, and it solidifies the connection between the eclipse and sealing Godwin's spread of Deathroot. And it also means all the enemies we face that are spitting out deathblight are harnessing the Prince of Death's flames. This links them all to Godwin, as he is called the Prince of Death by Fia in her questline. How and why the shuttle is able to call forth these flames could be very important. With no other apparent connection to Godwin, it seems to me that this weaponized symbol of the eclipse can contain and utilize the deathblight flames for its wielder. It has sealed destined death, able to call it forth at will. Again, we have such little information on the topic, so we can't speculate too much really, and there are so many questions remaining.
So I feel like that phrasing was, I don't want to say careless, but maybe a little bit misleading in that, in a certain sense, he is right that it does deal with destined death, because Deathroot is a form of the Rune of Death in a different form, but I would disagree that it's like destined death implicitly in like the Malekith or the Black Knife kind of sense there.
How could the eclipse restore souls? Why was half of the Haligtree secret medallion kept at Castle Sol? Is there another outer god of the eclipse? And how is the Eclipse Shuttle able to utilize Deathblight?
So St. Trina says the Wraith Color Bell also unleashes the same death flame. So yeah, I would disagree with that because the Wraith Calling Bell doesn't actually inflict Deathblight either. So yeah, I do wonder about that weird connection with the Basilisks and Deathblights. Maybe that's just more of an incidental thing. Maybe they actually were influenced by Godwin. I mean, I'm inclined to disagree just because like I like my Basilisks in the old way, and now they're different, and I don't like change. But yeah, maybe they're actually meant to be more directly connected after all. But I guess like one of the other issues with that is like, where do we fit worm faces in with everything? Because they can also like spew deathlight and have like gross worms coming out of them, and maybe it's a byproduct of like the worms and stuff, because within the deathblight vines itself you can see like really weird wings, almost like flies coming out of it, so maybe like the maggots are related to that in the grand scheme of things, but I don't know. Deathblight seems more connected to those who live in death, like the deathbird, the worms. Right. And it is really weird to me that the Deathrite birds are technically considered those who live in death, which is mind-boggling. Maybe they were all killed at one point and then just kind of like got brought back incidentally. I don't know. We do have the Omen who spit Wraith Spray, but only the two that use the actual Deathlight. You know, that's a good point to bring up the other one, because like I know the first one by the Minor Erdtree does use Fia's Sigil, so I need to double check that one in Oriza's Hero's Tomb.
And what is the frigid sun of Sol? Is there a cold sun especially for Castle Sol? Is this the regular tiny sun that we see? And is Godwin actually Miquella's soulless comrade? Could this be referring to a different soulless individual? As a side note on this last question, I'd like to mention Cosmos, who is an amazing lore explorer with some wild speculative content. In one of his videos, he pointed out that the armour worn by Ensha mentions an ancient lord, the Soulless King, the lord of the lost and desperate. They are only ever referred to in this armour set, and apart from the slumbering demigods, they are the only other being labelled as soulless. Now, there are a few one-off mentions of unique characters throughout Elden Ring. FromSoft clearly enjoy hinting towards plotlines they never intend to, or never had time to explore further. But Cosmos argues that maybe this Soulless King could have been Miquella's own royal consort. As an Empyrean, Miquella would have needed a consort to become a god, and there is never one mentioned for him in the game. This is definitely wild, but some really fun speculation. And with so little information to work with, this idea could tie the Soulless King into the narrative in a cool way. But that's all I think I can say on this one. There's too much mystery for us to say we know for certain the details surrounding Miquella's connection to the Eclipse. And while I can't deny that Miquella might have wanted to use the Eclipse to restore Godwin's soul, I'm not sure this would even imply that they had a close relationship. Miquella wouldn't have needed a close bond with Godwin to wish him a true death. And, as I concluded in the last chapter of this video, I don't think this area of the lore implies that they knew each other personally. To me, the Eclipse has more of a role in sealing the soulless demigods, preventing the spread of Deathroot and destined death. But there may be more to this that I've missed completely, so if I have, please let me know. It'll hopefully be...
And just to give a bit of extra context, it could be that Godwin was initially associated with the sun, and in death he became associated with the Eclipse, but all of that is very arguable as well.
explored in the DLC, and I'll keep looking at this area of the lore to try and find any more solid answers. But that wraps up the questions for Miquella having a close relationship with Godwin. I know a lot of you agreed that this was the main big problem for the usurping theory, but now I hope you'll agree that there's a good foundation for doubting that Miquella and Godwin knew each other. I am still conflicted, as the artwork of Miquella and Godwin is really amazing, and I know VartiVidya has based a fair few videos on this theory, but I hope I've made a strong enough argument for moving Godwin's death back to before Radagon went to Leyndell, and I really hope I've showed that it is viable in the lore. I think both arguments for and against their relationship do work, and both do make intuitive sense. So at this point, I can't deny that with all the mystery surrounding Miquella, it's fair if you simply prefer one theory over the other. For me, it's more intuitive that Miquella would have wanted to stop the spread of Godwin's Deathroot during his time as a fundamentalist. At the very least, it's still up for interpretation at this time. Again, if there's any other factors that I've missed, please let me know. I think I've covered most of the lore here, but I'll be more than happy to go over anything you guys point out in another video.
So that is actually a very interesting point right there, that Miquella may have wanted to get rid of Deathroot while he was still a fundamentalist, and that would imply that he may not have fully delved into unalloyed gold to save millennia, perhaps. Well, I don't know, because you do get the Haligtree symbol on the golden epitaph. And so, even though it like gives golden order, or not golden order, sacred order, it doesn't use the fundamentalist sigil. So maybe that kind of contradicts what he's saying here. Yeah, I could see that. Let me just back that up because I'm gonna like re-listen to that point again.
Mystery surrounding Miquella, it's fair if you simply prefer one theory over the other. For me, it's more intuitive that Miquella would have wanted to stop the spread of Godwin's Deathroot during his time as a fundamentalist. At the very least, it's still up for interpretation at this time. Again, if there's any other factors that I've missed...
Yeah, so the fact that the golden epitaph does use the Haligtree sigil could imply that he moved away from fundamentalism at that point. So does Miquella think that the Haligtree can provide a true death? Maybe that's why all the Albinorks are like in cocoons around that area? And I guess that could make sense why, like, he would want a tree in conjunction with, like, saving Malenia, because if it provides death, death is probably one of the only few things that could kill the Scarlet Rot. I mean, that sounds a little bit reductive here, but could stop the spread of the Scarlet Rot at the very least, and maybe reverse it? I want to think about that one a bit more. Hey, Chubby Health, thank you so much for becoming a channel member. I appreciate that. Enjoy the emotes. Our very small number. I should probably look to see if I could add more. It does state that he abandoned fundamentalism, though, when it couldn't cure his sister's rot. Right, and so I'm wondering about that now with, like, the Shattering, because he should have already abandoned fundamentalism before the Shattering really kicks off. So, yeah, I guess that makes sense. So he would have abandoned fundamentalism most likely before Godwin died. So yeah, let me just re-listen to the last point for like the third time. Oh no, buffering. This is the worst. Isn't the Haligtree supposed to replace the Erdtree? Yes. Not like this. Oh no. 2534. I might just need to refresh. Oh no, we're having a moment here, YouTube. Why? Titan says, death being the cure for Scarlet Rot does seem to work. The thing can't rot forever if it dies. Yeah. And so I think that's like the most crucial component that's missing in Scarlet Rot, is that decay only like works as decay if it consumes things completely and works on the dead. Man, this is awful. I just might need to like hard refresh here. Give me a second. That's the wrong button. Okay. Hasn't just been you today then? That's what I get for trying to like pay attention to what somebody says in a video, huh? Kim Lee asks, do we have... Try restarting your device? That's not how this works. Do you have any interpretation of the use of unalloyed? You find it very provocative that the typical gold of the Golden Order is impure. So, as far as like unalloyed gold, it's more like akin to pure gold in Japanese. So, like that's what unalloyed really means, I think. All right, let me double check the Japanese here. If
make intuitive sense.
I was gonna say, let me double check if we're waiting, and then it like comes up. All right. Okay, so it's not necessarily pure like I was thinking, like a Juku. It's Muku, which are like two different characters. So, the first characters are the ones we want to look at. The last one is gold or metal. So Muku means to be pure, innocent, spotless, immaculate, or unspoiled. Pure, unmixed, unadulterated. So I think calling it unalloyed gold is a really good localization to get that across. Maybe pure would be better. I don't necessarily know. But at the very least, as far as like metallurgy is gold, metallurgy is concerned, unalloyed gold is a fantastic option, I think. YouTube's been weird all day? Okay. Eldegusto thinks the Haligtree can rebirth people and souls without relying on systems of the universe currently in play. I don't really know about that because with Miquella watering the Haligtree with his own blood, it leads me to believe that his goal was to not have souls return into the Haligtree, and he wanted to be the fuel, kind of like a martyr perhaps. And maybe there's a good reason for that. Maybe there's a bad one. Time will tell, or tell us nothing at all. Trina says, basically, if Miquella were just Miquella, Godwin would have a decent amount of implicit connection to Miquella, but if you had to also include Saint Trina, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence, in your opinion? For what? Maybe I lost something in the chat there. Let me try this. No, okay. Do we know who burned down the Erdtree the first time? So it is kind of implied that it could have been Melina because she's already burned and bodiless, but technically, no, we don't know. Oh, just that their goal is intertwined in some way? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's more to consider with Jarhead and like the timeline with the birth of the twins. And I'm not sure if they're going to continue to go into that, so I'll just kind of shut up for now and continue to play the video. But if he doesn't address it, remind me to talk about the twin timeline, I guess. Or I have notes on my video. I can just add them manually. Okay, never mind.
So at this point, I can't deny that with all the mystery surrounding Miquella, it's fair if you simply prefer one theory over the other. For me, it's more intuitive that Miquella would have wanted to stop the spread of Godwin's Deathroot during his time as a fundamentalist. At the very least, it's still up for interpretation at this time. Again, if there's any other factors that I've missed, please let me know. I think I've covered most of the lore here, but I'll be more than happy to go over anything you guys point out in another video. Many of you asked the question, why would Radagon impersonate Marika instead of just ruling over Leyndell himself? Well, as I tried to explain in my first video, I think Radagon and the Two Fingers would have needed to keep the appearance of normality after he usurped Marika. The Order was heavily weakened by the shattering of the Elden Ring after all. Ensuring continued worship of Marika would help them re-strengthen it.
The Golden Order is founded on the principle that Marika is the one true god.
Alright, so I guess I will touch on like the timeline stuff. And this might be what Jarhead was talking about in reference to the comments he left on my last reaction stream to his video, in that the timeline of the twins might have put some things into perspective for him. And he might still believe the usurpation theory, but I do think it gets more difficult when we consider that the birth of the twins should imply that Radagon and Marika are already of one body, and I am of the opinion that the twins should have been born before the Shattering, so that way they could have their armies to participate in the Shattering, and so that way they could also inherit their shards of the Great Rune, or at least Melania, because we don't really know if Miquella has one, technically speaking, but right, I digress. You like to think the whole unalloyed gold thing is Miquella's propaganda more than his order actually being more pure with its gold? I think it probably is a more pure form of gold, and one of the more interesting things to me about that form of gold is that it seems to be a more faded, or like perhaps a tarnished version of the kind of gold implicit within the Golden Order, and it's not red like the dragon's gold, so right.
While I think this would have been the main reason for Radagon choosing to pose as Marika, there are other reasons that could have potentially contributed. For one, there could have been a technicality, or a specific reason why Radagon wasn't suitable to take Marika's place as God of the Golden Order. All Empyreans have been a female so far, so maybe being a male just isn't suitable. Well, Miquella was an Empyrean of course, but maybe even he was transitioning inside of his cocoon into St. Trina. Alternatively, the Two Fingers might have not wanted to end the current age, as has happened when gods have been usurped in the past. It would have led to a period of great change, and although the Golden Order would probably have survived this transition, it could have been too risky for them in their weakened state. This is just me speculating, so I can't say why they didn't just make Radagon the new god. But as a loyal fundamentalist, I'm sure Radagon would have preferred to simply stick to Marika being the one true god. So, as the Two Fingers would have been the one to send Radagon to Leyndell to usurp Marika, they would, of course, always have known that she had long been shackled in the Erdtree. They would also want to keep up the facade of order and the status quo, as they are the ones in the position of highest power, and it gives them the opportunity to strengthen their hold over the lands between by implementing fundamentalism as the ruling form of worship.
Right, and so that's kind of always hard for me to just reconfigure like my mental timeline of events that like Marika in Jarhead's mind would have already been sealed within the tree before Radagon returns to Leyndell to like mend the shattered Elden Ring, perhaps. So yeah, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's actually wrong. I don't like. There's nothing to like explicitly deny that, which is why I like referenced the timeline in relation to the twins and everything. Jimmy Jenkins says, the Golden Order is known to ally with its former enemies. Maybe Miquella sees that as alloyed gold and strives for his gold to avoid that. If so, it is really weird that he's kind of fine with Albinorix and potentially like the Misbegotten in the Haligtree. But right. The Omen in the Oriza Grave does use the Death Sorcery symbol when casting. Okay, Titan, cool. Does it use, like, the muddied colored one that's, like, half gold or, like, brown and crap? Or does it use, like, a full black and white version? I'm assuming, like, the Fia style. And yeah, as St. Trina says, it is hard to reconcile the opening scene of them both hitting the ring in that case. I agree with that completely, as well as, like, the scars which appear on Marika are reflected on Radagon, so it doesn't make any sense to me that Radagon was technically his own person first, and then by mending it, he became Marika because of those scars, which is an excellent point to bring up as well. So, nonetheless, I'm still going to like try to entertain this as best I can.
I will admit this might all seem like a leap of logic, so I've been thinking of the best way of describing why this idea is so intuitive to me, and I think the best way in doing so would be to talk about the Erdtree. I've always been very interested in the speculation that the Erdtree itself might actually be a golden shade of an original ancient tree. The Tarnished Archaeologist covers this idea in brilliant detail. I'd highly recommend viewing his content if you haven't already. But as a summary, he points out several elements around Leyndell that suggest the Erdtree is really just a giant phantom. The huge amounts of ash and the gold wax sealing it out of the windows and doorways tells us there was another previous cataclysm within the city, one that happened long before we arrived in the lands between. Interestingly, the dark strike over the entrance of the Erdtree is actually made of a different type of wood. When I first saw it,
so doesn't Tarnished Archaeologists kind of like retcon their own opinion by saying that the burning of the Erdtree was synonymous with the shattering of the Elden Ring? Which is kind of why like I have a lot of issues with TA's videos, that they're self-referential to a point where it's hard to follow their previous arguments, and then they kind of like conflict their statements at times. So yeah, I have a lot to talk about that, but I don't want to like get too off topic here.
I just thought it was a shadow cast by some sort of scar, like a large split or hollow running up the trunk. But, thanks to Sekiro Doobie's amazing footage of the Erdtree, we can see the clear separation of materials. And, as the non-golden wood can be seen all the way at the top of the tree, this honestly could be the remains of an original tree. At night we can see this more clearly. If this really is all we see of the original tree, then most of the Erdtree is actually a golden facade. This would be a similar illusion to the smaller trees that the Golden Seas describe as illusory. Sekiro do be.
And again, I talk about this a lot on the stream in that I do feel as though calling it an illusory tree is a little bit unfortunate because it gives the impression perhaps that it isn't real, which is like a half-truth. And I don't think phantom is the worst way to translate that, but another way to talk about it would be like incorporeal. So it's still a real tree. It just might not be like a physical tree exactly. But I guess even that is kind of wrong because you can interact with these small illusory trees and like strike them, and like dust and stuff does fly up out of the air. I do tend to think that what might be coating the Erdtree is just a product of it absorbing souls and like Erdtree burial. And so with the shattering disconnected the Erdtree from its roots, I think this might be why part of it is starting to fade perhaps, although that is very heavy speculation on my part. And there is more to talk about that eventually as well. Ephemeral tree? Maybe. Okay, going back to the video.
He also points out these golden threads on the higher branches. It's as though creeping vines are growing all over the old tree. I personally think these are very convincing indicators of an original tree hiding beneath its golden facade. And as the tarnished archaeologist suggests, this phantom of the Erdtree is very similar to the golden shade of Godfrey that we fight in the Erdtree Sanctuary. So I mentioned.
And that might be a bit fair because this kind of Godfrey guy is still sort of physical. He certainly can still deal damage to us. And so my argument is just like more of a pedantic thing, in that some people might get a kind of different impression than what I think is intended on both like the localizers and developers and even like tarnished archaeologists' part. So I'm not like really saying like, oh, TA is wrong. I'm just saying like caveat. All right. Titan's going to send me a screenshot of what? All right, so Without Horn says, this is going back a bit, but just to clarify, is he saying that the Two Fingers sort of took over as the head of the faith while Radagon is sealed in the tree? So, not exactly. He's saying that Marika shattered the Elden Ring before Radagon returned to Lane Dell, and when she did that, if I'm remembering correctly, Jarhead believes the Two Fingers retaliated by selecting Radagon to go back as like the Elden Lord to be like the new god. And so like the Two Fingers may have blessed Radagon to go back and mend the ring, which is a little bit strange because like, why didn't they just use one of the Empyreans instead? And all of that as well. Okay, you're sending the screenshot of the Omen. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Just want to look at that real quick. Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I figured. Thank you. It's kind of interesting that that Omen doesn't really have like the black robes either, but... Wait, that one doesn't have horns. Interesting. Neither did the other, but just kind of... Kolo thinks the Erdtree was made to reject death, and now Godwin has corrupted its roots. So maybe he thinks that a new tree that can accept him could fix the problem. Sorry, are you talking about Radagon in this interpretation here, or this theory? Of course, that would require him to not know the real cause, which is Ronnie taking half the rune for selfish reasons? Maybe. Okay.
Mention the illusory nature of the Erdtree because it ties in really well to an allegory I was planning to include in my original video. It involves Dark Souls, Gwyndolin, and the city of Anor Londo, so spoilers ahead for anyone who is yet to play the first Dark Souls. When we meet one of the most memorable characters in the game, Gwynevere, the Princess of Sunlight, she gives us the task of succeeding Lord Gwyn. However, in reality, Gwynevere is just an illusion created by her younger brother Gwyndolin. If you attack her, Gwyndolin will denounce you and dispel an illusion he's cast over the entirety of Anor Londo.
Thou that tarnisheth the Godmother's image, I am Gwyndolin, and thy transgression shall not go unpunished. thou shalt perish in the twilight of Anor Londo.
He reveals the entire city is dark and desolate, caught in the dying twilight of Gwyn's Age of Fire, a far cry from the bright splendour we see on our first arrival. Gwendolyn created a facade over the entire city, bathing it in golden rays of sunlight. And, in a similar manner, the Erdtree also has its own shining golden facade, giving off the impression of splendour and life. This is also a far cry from the stories of the divine benefits the Erdtree once produced. As such, I feel it can be argued that the Erdtree mirrors the illusion of Anor Londo. At the very least, I think the idea of a false facade surrounding Leyndell isn't an unimaginable concept for FromSoft to use.
Alright, so he did actually go off the deep end there and suggest that it's like a full-on illusion, and I would disagree strongly with that by the virtue of us actually being able to burn the upper portions of the Erdtree, the golden portions. And so if that's all an illusion, then like why is the Erdtree burning? Maybe you can make the argument that it's like the real wood underneath it, but even still, like, we still get ashes coming off the Erdtree. We do have leaves falling off of it at night, so I don't really think it's actually meant to be an illusion. And you might be able to argue that even if it's an illusion, it's like a different kind of illusion where it's like still having a physical effect on the world, because the Silver Knights of Anor Londo, despite being illusions, can damage the player just like Godfrey, so maybe they're just meaning it in that way. So this could just be more of like a pedantic thing here. Yeah, why does it leave so much ash? Okay. Hey, Tea-Watered Houseplant, welcome back to the stream.
I want to be clear, just because FromSoft has a habit of repeating certain thematic elements in the game, like dragons and their stony scales, it doesn't mean this is definitely happening here as well. I just want to emphasise that the concept of a grand illusion taking place to give the appearance of continued virility is something FromSoft has explored in the past, so it wouldn't be outlandish if this were reflected within Elden Ring. And I think there are many similarities between Anor Londo and the Erdtree. We are told many times of the splendour the Erdtree once had. Its blessed drops of sap were once bestowed personally by Queen Marika many years ago, and the sacred tears of the Erdtree, once a potent blessing, are now only faint vestiges. And thanks to the steep decline in its bounties, we are told that the Erdtree now serves only as a mere object of faith. It is merely a symbol of worship for the Golden Order. I think this decline could tie into both Marika shattering the Elden Ring and her disappearance from the lands between. That said, it is implied to have happened a very long time ago, so this decline could still have happened during Godfrey's era. But now, with the diminished bounties of the Erdtree, it has become an object of faith. And the Erdtree becoming an object of faith ties in really well with fundamentalism coming into the picture. As fundamentalism forbids anything that challenges the principles of the Golden Order, calling them acts of heresy and blasphemy, all potential opposing forces to the Erdtree are completely blocked from taking root. And this draconian ideology is a huge departure from the original liberal approach of the Golden Order.
Fascinating, isn't it? That the Golden Order was pliable enough to absorb practices that contradicted itself in the past. With the Order broken, twisted, and in need of repair, such adaptability is more important now than ever.
I'm very interested in how Queen Marika's own search for a deeper meaning within the Golden Order aligns with the more traditional ideology.
I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order.
Her own doubts about the Order go completely against fundamentalism.
Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past.
I don't think Marika ever agreed with fundamentalism, so to me it makes more sense that fundamentalism was established after Marika had disappeared. Within the usurping theory, this ties perfectly with Radagon arriving in Leyndell and becoming the second Elden Lord.
So I feel like that bit of text is directly contradicted through Marika saying that she intends to explore fundamentalism. Doesn't he? Yeah, he uses the quote right before that, so I'm really confused. Let me just rewatch that. Hey, Metal Fingers, welcome back to the stream. Yeah, fundamentalism is the exact opposite of blind belief. It scales off of int, indeed. So first name, last name? Okay.
I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order.
Her own doubts about the Order go completely against fundamentalism.
Oh, right. So yeah, this is just kind of like one of my misgivings where I interpret the Golden Order to be strictly associated with Radagon, but not everybody does. So this one's kind of more on me and is debatable on multiple fronts.
Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past.
I don't think Marika ever agreed with fundamentalism. So to me, it makes more sense that fundamentalism was established after Marika had disappeared. Within the usurping theory, this ties perfectly with Radagon arriving in Leyndell and becoming the second Elden Lord.
So, yeah, I got a little bit lost in my thoughts there.
Golden Order.
Her own doubts about the Order go completely against fundamentalism.
Yeah, so no, I would strongly disagree with that, and
those blissful early days of blind belief are long past.
I feel like this right here is the direct contradiction to the own statement that he just made. So I feel like this is a little bit of an own goal, because the way that I interpret this, at least, is that Marika is no longer relying on faith, and by turning to fundamentalism and searching the depths of the Golden Order, she will become able to have a stronger understanding of her grace by incorporating all of the intelligence-based stuff that you get with Golden Order fundamentalism and the Radagon ideology.
I don't think Marika ever agreed with fundamentalism. So to me, it makes more sense that fundamentalism was established after Marika had disappeared. Within the usurping theory, this ties perfectly with Radagon arriving in Leyndell and becoming the second Elden Lord. So I think it's safe to say that fundamentalism is a separate form of worship from Marika's own ideology. Instead, as it's heavily associated and practiced by Radagon, it's intuitive that fundamentalism is likely Radagon's own form of religious practice.
And I kind of agree with him here in that Marika's initial form of worship was probably something that she was stepping away from, and she wanted to explore Radagon's ideals there. So that's just the way that I look at it. So yeah, we just have some fundamental disagreements here.
To solidify their power and ensure no one could ever question the Golden Order again, the Two Fingers wanted a faithful follower, a leal hound, to become the ruler of the lands between and establish fundamentalism. And the propagation of strict fundamentalism really would guarantee that no one could question the Golden Order ever again.
And right, as T-Watered Houseplant said, they think that Jarhead's interpreting fundamentalism as its real-world counterpart. In other words, returning to a religion's roots and rejecting scholarly tradition, which is the opposite of what it is in-game, right? And it is kind of interesting that we watched the Lore Hunters video the other day that compared the network test descriptions to the final build of the game, which said in, was it Litany of Proper Death, that the basis of fundamentalism was like based on scholarship, essentially. Something along those lines. I might need to like look it up, but yeah. It's no longer quite as explicit in the final build of the game, which maybe is unfortunate in the grand scheme of things. Like yesterday I was saying, oh, I don't really mind this because it kind of says the same stuff. But if that can kind of lead people like Jarhead astray, in my opinion, into believing that fundamentalism is meant more in the sense of going like to the literal fundamentals of a religion rather than interpreting it as a scholarly understanding of the fundamentals of order, then I think that might be a little bit unfortunate. But I mean, sometimes that's just like the way the cookie crumbles, that what you write might not be what somebody interprets naturally. All right, Clown Scum, thanks for dropping in, and good luck on the job interview. Yeah. And good night. El Degusto says, knowledge is akin to divinity to them, so fundamentalism would need to be scholarly. Yes. So that's kind of where I'm at, in that I do think Jarhead is kind of misunderstanding what fundamentalism actually is in the Elden Ring universe here. Yeah. And as Kimley says, TA made a cool interpretation that Radagon is kind of like Newton divining the laws of reality. And that's the way that I looked at it as well, especially with the Golden Order Principia there. Okay, I'm gonna back this up ever so slightly here.
The lands between and establish fundamentalism. And the propagation of strict fundamentalism really would guarantee that no one could question the Golden Order ever again. This transition from a firm but malleable ideology to a dogmatic autocratic rule over the lands between would need to maintain the image of Marika as the one true god. Even though she has to be punished by being locked in the Erdtree, this transgression cannot be publicly known.
The Golden Order is founded on the principle that Marika is the one true god.
This really is the cornerstone of the Golden Order. Public knowledge of Marika's punishment for breaking the Elden Ring would shake the foundations of the entire faith. So it makes sense to me that a facade of order, with Marika's image remaining untarnished by her crimes, would be the most beneficial to the Order. Additionally, it gives them the opportunity to implement fundamentalism, putting an end to any other potential forces that oppose the Erdtree. The everlasting prosperity and divinity of the Erdtree is another certainty of the Golden Order, or as Corrin puts it,
the culmination of perfection.
Both of these tenets would have to be enshrined as fact for Radagon to maintain the status quo. As such, keeping a bright golden phantom Erdtree with the appearance of glory and splendour actually turns it into a tool that aids maintaining the facade of prosperity and normality, just like Gwendolyn's illusion over Anor Londo. It's not Radagon himself.
And I think one other thing worth consideration about the whole golden illusory tree phenomenon that doesn't take the full picture into account is the warming stone description, when it says that the rays of the Erdtree used to be like the sun and healed all who like bathed in those rays, essentially. And does that mean you had a previously wooden tree that like still somehow glistened with light in more concentrated forms that healed people? I feel like that's just a little bit unintuitive compared to the depiction of the Erdtree that we have in game, as well as all the depictions of the Erdtree in paintings in like the Round Table Hold and other places. So I am team Golden Erdtree because it's just called the Golden Tree in Japanese.
Creating the Phantom Erdtree, but rather the facade is created through the Elden Ring. This can be seen through the different forms of the Erdtree depending on how we repair the Elden Ring at the end of the game. In the Age of Fracture, the Erdtree returns undamaged by the Flame of Ruin, in a familiar condition with leaves continuing to fall. With Dung Eater's Mending Rune, the Erdtree is completely barren, devoid of colour and any leaves. With Fear's Mending Rune, a world of death restored, through all the pesky soot, the golden canopy has been restored, with a golden tinge to the tree. And in the Age of Order, with Goldmask's Mending Rune protecting the Elden Ring from any further interference, the Erdtree is blazing with golden light. Even the central scar around its entrance has some glimmer back, and the leaves are no longer falling. From the different endings, we know the Elden Ring defines the form of the Erdtree, and the Erdtree...
Which is also why I'm against the whole like phantom theory, because if so, you're just kind of perpetuating the phantom yourself when you become the Elden Lord, with the exception of obviously Irani's ending and the Frenzied Flame, so it seems more likely that this is meant to be more corporeal in some ways than this theory gives credit. Have faith, bro, yeah. You feel like Radagon and Marika's wedding would have to be public? Could you imagine Rad's appearing and just saying to the people, yeah, bro, I got married to God now, so now I'm Elden Lord, just believe me, bro? Yeah. I don't know about that because it like happens in Liurnia, so I think people are kind of forced to take his word for it, and he might be doing like the whole, I don't want to say Scooby-Doo, but like never like two parents in the same room thing, or same room thing, and so like Marika may be instituting some stuff like royal decrees, and people are like, oh yeah, that sounds good to me. And yeah, it's all weird. We are kind of told or like hinted at that Marika may have shapeshifted quite a bit with the Marika's Mischief description. So, right. I do like the whole headcanon interpretations of like the retroactive fitting of Radagon into the timeline with the usurpation theory here, even if I'm not an adherent of it nonetheless.
We know while playing through the game is maintained by Radagon and the Elden Beast. Their Erdtree can no longer create the blessings it granted when Marika was actually ruling during the Golden Age. Finally, I'll add that maintaining a fake world with Radagon pretending that Marika is still in control would help explain the general stagnancy and decline of the lands between. It could be argued that the shattering of the Elden Ring began this decline, and the warring demigods certainly royally screwed up many parts of the world. But if Marika breaking the Elden Ring was followed by Radagon shackling her in the Erdtree, then I feel her absence would lead to a decline felt by the whole world. So yeah, I hope you'll agree that the motives for Radagon and the Two Fingers maintaining the status quo do make sense. And I think Nico Gurn put it best, Radagon pretending to be Marika also mirrors how Anor Londo has one god ruling as another. Just as Gwendolyn maintained the image of
I wanna back that up with the whole like in the Erdtree thing. I just wanna
Elden Ring began this decline, and the warring demigods certainly royally screwed up many parts of the world. But if Marika breaking the Elden Ring was followed by Radagon shackling her in the Erdtree, then I feel her absence would lead to a decline felt by the whole world. So yeah, I hope...
Alright, so now I'm a little bit confused if in this usurpation theory, does Jarhead believe that Radagon still like walked around outside of the Erdtree after like mending the Elden Ring? Or was he still stuck in there with Marika? Because I think he says like it's at that point that they fuse. And so if he could just like walk around as Radagon and not be like confining Marika within the Erdtree itself, that would be very counterintuitive to me for a number of reasons. And I think does throw a big wrench into things about like when Melania and Miquella are born. So they could have been born in the Erdtree, potentially like similarly to Melina, ? And maybe they were freed because they're not bound within it by the Elden Beast or whatnot. But if Radagon needs to be stuck in the Erdtree with Marika, then how did people know he became second Elden Lord? Was he just like talked about by the other demigods? I don't really think that works. Then we also have the issue of him trading incantations with Miquella and needing that much time between Godwin dying and him gaining all of those spells with Miquella, having those changes occur before like the full-on Shattering War broke out and like Miquella and Melania had their conflict with Radahn. So I just don't really feel as though a lot of this stuff really adds up in like the greater context of the timeline, which might go back to what Jarhead had commented on the previous video with me reacting to it. So, right. In that case, I am kind of disappointed that he still went full steam ahead with this video, because in my mind, I feel like this usurpation theory is kind of fully contradicted, and maybe he still feels differently. Yeah, I don't know. Perhaps the demigods have direct audience with their parents, like how Melina can recite Marika's whispers. So the issue with Marika and her spoken echoes lingering is that they're literally spoken echoes that are lingering. So it's not as though like Melina is potentially directly communing with Marika, although maybe she is, because it is really counterintuitive that Marika talks as though she's having like one conversation that's continuing between the Third Church of Marika in Limgrave and the Church of Pilgrimage with the Radagon statue in the Weeping Peninsula's northwest portion. So maybe you're right. But it is also strange to me that we would have actual depictions of Radagon beyond the walls of Raya Lucaria if he was sealed up in the Erdtree. No, we also have the sculptor to worry about too, don't we? So I think that would necessitate Radagon being able to like leave the Erdtree, which is fine if you think that Marika is still sealed within him and is still like kind of sort of in the Erdtree maybe. I don't know. I just don't think this theory really works on multiple levels. No, I appreciate the devil's advocate. Yeah, don't get me wrong there. It seems like psychic energy manifesting at places tied to the words. That's what I thought, but I am like kind of rethinking that with the Third Church of America and the Church of Pilgrimage text. All right.
Hope you'll agree that the motives for Radagon and the Two Fingers maintaining the status quo do make sense. And I think Nico Gurn put it best. Radagon pretending to be Marika also mirrors how Anor Londo has one god ruling as another. Just as Gwyndolin maintained the image of Guinevere ruling over Anor Londo, due to her being a more suitable figurehead, continued worship of Marika would definitely be needed for Radagon to implement Golden Order fundamentalism.
And within the greater context of Elden Ring, I don't really have like a problem with that theory at this point anymore, because like Elden Ring has really opened up that can of worms that anybody can be anybody at this point, which is just awful. But in Dark Souls, at least, we are kind of shown that like one person isn't ever exactly two people. So like Gwyndolin, even though he kind of poses himself as Guinevere, he isn't actually Guinevere, which I think is important to consider. And so I don't necessarily think this comparison is fully apt, although within the grander context of Elden Ring, I'll allow it, I guess. You thought it was like ghosts, but for dialogue only, word ghosts? Yeah, and that's kind of what they are, like, culturally speaking. So maybe, like, Marika just repeated herself in multiple locations? It's weird.
I think this theory goes pretty far in providing an understanding of why the world is the way it is. But I'm sure I've left out details many of you want answers to for this, and there are other questions on this topic that I won't have time to answer in this video. So again, please let me know of any points and any bits of lore you'd like to go over. Many people disagreed with the theory that Goldmask's discovery of Radagon usurping Marika led to his apparent blasphemous thoughts. Although this would explain why his thoughts are going against Golden Order principles, many of you had many other theories for what his heretical ideas could have been. And that's completely fair. We can't know for certain what Goldmask is thinking. We only have the interpretations from Corrin. The idea that Goldmask was instead cataloguing the history of the Golden Order was pretty popular. Here, Goldmask would have gotten stumped by Radagon's untraceable origins. This would work with his mathematical approach, but I personally have to disagree. I really don't feel this idea takes into account everything from the rest of their questline. Specifically, I think Corrin's use of the term holism is very important to understand how Goldmask's thoughts are heretical.
The rhythms and calculus of the Master's finger betray a suspicion of the holism of the Golden Order, a conceit, I am afraid, that cannot be overlooked.
According to Google, holism is the theory that every individual component of a system is only understandable when it is looked at in relation to the entire system as a whole. If you take a component out of a system, it no longer makes any sense as an individual idea. And as each component would be incomprehensible when viewed away from the entire system, then the entire system is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those things where I don't exactly know the nuance of what, like, kanzen in Japanese is in relation to this specific concept of holism, because kanzen does mean literally like whole, and not the kind that it would be in a ground or in a pocket, but right. The fact, like, kanzen can mean perfect as well, but it means like whole, and those are kind of like similar concepts, I guess. So yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with this. I'm just like kind of curious about it on like a linguistic level from like Japanese to English here. If that's the less saucy version of holism, maybe.
So, taking out one component makes that component incomprehensible, and the system that is left over is also much weaker. So what could Goldmask questioning the holism of the Golden Order be referring to? Well, using this definition, I viewed Goldmask as taking one principle out of the Golden Order. This would make the Golden Order weaker, and the removed principle would make no sense on its own. As I said in the last video,
it would be very nice if he gave us a tangible example of the principle that he's talking about, because I feel like this is backwards, like completely backwards. But we'll see.
As Corin mentions only one principle in particular, I think it is likely this principle that Goldmask is questioning.
Alright, here we go.
Corin even brought up this principle in the same paragraph as Radagon's name appearing.
The Golden Order is founded on the principle that Marika is the one true god. However, the name of Marika's second husband, King Consort Radagon, also appeared. Who exactly was Radagon? The Master is stumped. His finger has remained still ever since Radagon's name was discovered.
If Marika had long been shackled in the Erdtree, then Radagon was the real god in control of the Golden Order. Radagon ruling the Golden Order, whilst Marika is no longer in control, would certainly challenge this principle to its core. This explains how Goldmask is questioning the holism of the Golden Order, and this also works with his mathematical and logical approach. From a game narrative perspective, Corin mentioning this principle alongside Radagon's name appearing helps to make this a more intuitive progression of their questline. Narrative is particularly important to me, as I love the art of storytelling and narrative creation, and I believe this theory definitely works with the lore and, I think, is a more satisfying progression and conclusion. So I think holism is important, as FromSoft have a history of choosing their words carefully. They are often discrepancies between the English and Japanese, so both must be taken into account to find the true intentions of the dialogue. On the Japanese, it appears the questioning of the holism of the Golden Order is translated from questioning the integrity of the Golden Order.
Alright, I guess I will need to look at this directly here. I'll let him finish his thoughts while I pull it up.
The Golden Order's holism into doubt is certainly questioning its integrity, and the word holism might just be describing this in a more specific way. Radagon ruling as Marika would make him the god of the Golden Order, and again, it directly conflicts with the principle of Marika being the one true god.
Alright, so as far as this quote goes, betrays suspicion of the holism of the order. So the Golden Order's Kanzen-ness. So like, this character say just kind of like means like ness, essentially. The suffix in English just like denotes a quality of something. So like in Dark Souls, like humanity is like the character for human, or characters for human, plus say, so like humaneness, but not like literally the English version of humaneness, just like the quality of what it is to be a person or a human. All right, so as I'd mentioned before, Kanzen does just mean like perfect or complete, whereas what was he saying? Integrity? Let me put this away for a second.
For the Japan, and again,
yeah, integrity. I could kind of get where he's coming from with that. Maybe let's look at like, what's another good English dictionary? Koto Bank, or is that only native? Yeah, this is native. I mean, integrity isn't exactly wrong, but I don't really feel like that gets the whole picture. Definitions. Not Chinese. Complete whole. So this is Mandarin. So, okay. Seems like an idiomatic expression. Maybe this will go into more detail for you guys. Yeah, okay, so this is the Yoji Jukugo, so that's not going to help us. Kanzenna, yep, okay. Yeah, I don't really think we're going to get something super good. Nar's not going to help us. Okay. So I'm just not going to worry about that. So I don't think integrity is quite right here. Just because From might be definite with the words doesn't mean the localizers are. Yeah, sometimes like it's just like things get lost in translation no matter like how good the translation actually is. And so Yeah. I don't think like this was a bad translation by any means. You can see the wind part of the tree at the top losing gold, so it's definitely not an illusion. So people are saying like the gold part is the illusion specifically, rather than the tree, I think. So, I don't know. Try Deep L. I mean, I don't really need Deep L. This is the part of Japanese where like Deep L is so elementary, it's not going to give you the deep answers that you need, I guess. No pun intended, actually. So, like, I know exactly what this is saying. I'm just trying to reconcile whether or not Kanzensei should be understood as integrity, and I would, like, disagree with this. But the specific way that Jarhead is trying to say that Kanzen should be understood as holism, I think, is inaccurate, but I don't know enough about the linguistics of this word, the etymology of it, to say whether or not it is completely incompatible with this specific reading of holism, if that makes sense. So I would probably like need to look at like philosophical definitions of like kanzen, but I don't really think that would really go into this. And like this is the issue where like I don't know enough about holism in English to really have a good chance of like looking this up in Japanese, if that makes sense. So anyway, I'll just back this up a little bit and then move along.
The Golden Order. Questioning of the holism of the Golden Order is translated from questioning the integrity of the Golden Order. Calling the Golden Order's holism into doubt is certainly questioning its integrity, and the word holism might just be describing this in a more specific way. Radagon ruling as Marika would make him the god of the Golden Order, and again, it directly conflicts with the principle of Marika being the one true god. For the Japanese of Corrin mentioning this principle, Corrin says, the Golden Order is the law that makes Queen Marika the one god. The use of the term law stands out to me, and in the context of Goldmask's thoughts later being heretical to Corrin, it again seems likely that this was the law Goldmask was going against. But I'm not 100% confident on these translations, so if anyone could help with translating this part of the dialogue, it would be a huge help. But yeah, taking into account the entirety of Corrin's dialogue actually gives us a lot to work with, and I really think we should be trying to use all the information FromSoft has given us. I hope you guys will also find this a more interesting progression of their questline. I know a popular theory is Goldmask was simply thinking the Golden Order isn't perfect in general. I can't deny this is a very valid possibility, for we aren't able to know for certain what Goldmask is thinking. Again, this would fit the narrative, but I think it completely departs from the progression of their questline, and disregards most of the dialogue.
Alright, so just to give that bit of extra context that I was like waiting to talk about. Not holism, what was it? Order healing, I think? Okay, so earlier in Jarhead's video, he was talking about the principle that Goldmask was taking out of the Golden Order, which I think is completely backwards. I think that Goldmask is looking at the Golden Order holistically here, and that the issue with the Golden Order is Marika's short-sightedness, in that she turned her back on the Golden Order by smashing it with the Elden Ring. And so... Oh, okay. Oh, man. Okay. I know the issue here, and I'm trying to think of a way to articulate this that makes sense in Jarhead's like picturing of the timeline of events here. And so with him thinking that the Golden Order begins with Marika and Godfrey, that's perfectly understandable. And so his conception of Goldmask wanting to keep the Golden Order going is also contingent on the belief that it started with Marika and Godfrey. And so does he not think that Gold Mask is a Golden Order fundamentalist, or does he just think like he's a Golden Order adherent? And are those two separate terms in his mind? So let me look up some stuff relating to Gold Mask first before Golden Order fundamentalists. So yeah, I feel like you can't separate Gold Mask from the fundamentalists. So I'll come back to Order Healing in a second. This one doesn't necessarily talk about fundamentalism. Yeah, okay. Okay, no, okay, this is perfect. So, created and left by Lord Goldmask, a staunch pursuer of Golden Order fundamentalism. Okay, that's exactly what I needed, which makes total sense to me, obviously. So, going back to Order Healing, right? Nope, past it. Okay, so, nope, that's not it. Order Healing. The noble Gold Mask lamented what had become of the hunters, how easy it is for learning and learnedness to be reduced to the ravings of fanatics. All the good and the great wanted in their foolishness was an absolute evil to contend with. Does such a notion exist in the fundamentals of order? So this is very clear to me that with Order Healing alleviating Deathblight buildup, in Gold Mask's mind, the Golden Order fundamentalism isn't necessarily incompatible with those who live in death. And the issue, which will tie into his Mending Rune here, is that the current imperfection of the Golden Order, aka Golden Order fundamentalism, or its instability of ideology, can be blamed upon the fickleness of the gods no better than men. That is the fly in the ointment. So, with Gold Mask being a Golden Order fundamentalist, he is blaming Marika for the issue with the Golden Order, and he's blaming the shattering of the ring on her breaking Golden Order fundamentalism in my mind. So I don't think that this perspective is compatible with Jarhead's at all, really. So how do I break that down even better is what I'm trying to figure out. Anyway, so if the issue is that those who live in death don't actually act as the absolute evil within the Golden Order fundamentalist ideology, then why does Marika shatter the Elden Ring? She doesn't need to, and that's the issue with Marika in Gold Mask's mind. So he believes that the Golden Order fundamentalist belief is perfect, and the issue is the god being imperfect and breaking this, which I think is contingent on Marika shattering the Elden Ring, and therefore the Golden Order predating the shattering. So, yeah, I feel like Jarhead has got the cart before the horse with this perspective here. So hopefully that works for you guys in the chat. I think I lost the context of your message there, Colo. If Margit can be in multiple places at the same time, then so can Radagon. And that's a pretty fair point, to be fair there. Okay, T-Water had pointed out that it's in the mask. Thank you. You took his point to be that Gold Mask is the ultimate skeptic trying to discern the truth. I don't know if he's a skeptic. I think he's probably the most grounded fundamentalist, and that he's actually the only one applying the fundamentals of order into his pursuit of knowledge, because knowledge is holy in the Golden Order essentially, and he's pursuing knowledge, and that is kind of the most holy pursuit that one can have. So he and Radagon should have been best buds, perhaps. he's going to address the Mending Rune translation. You think the point is that America has a problem with the nature of reality, which is perfectly understood by fundamentalism bar zealotry. Okay, thank you, Kimley.
Similarly, many have said that Goldmask could simply be questioning the role of the capricious gods. His Mending Rune does make his thoughts on the Golden Order pretty clear, and such thoughts alone would upset the fundamentalist Corrin. So now, let's move on to talking about Goldmask's Mending Rune. At the end of the questline, we find the Mending Rune of Perfect Order. I feel we really must view this Mending Rune with all of the questline. It is the conclusion Goldmask has reached from all his contemplations on the Golden Order. A rune of transcendental ideology, which will attempt to perfect the Golden Order. The current imperfection of the Golden Order, or instability of ideology, can be blamed upon the fickleness of gods no better than men. That is the fly in the ointment. The imperfection of the Golden Order is the result of the fickleness of gods no better than men, and a huge part of this conclusion comes directly from Goldmask learning the message Radagon is Marika. When added to the Elden Ring, the Mending Rune would act as a barrier around it, protecting it from being changed or abused by the gods for their own desires ever again. His transcendental ideology is that the Elden Ring is more important than any single individual, human or god. The Japanese for the Mending Rune has a different phrasing to describe the fickleness of the gods, and I found two slightly different translations. There is no need for a man-like mindful god, and, like a man, God with a heart is unnecessary. To me, this is telling us that Goldmask blames the instability of the Golden Order on the human-like reactions of the gods. It was the emotional responses of Marika and Radagon that were to blame. The word gods, plural.
All right, let me back that up because there's a couple errors there.
Responses of the Golden.
Yeah, he is missing a character in front of Motsu. He's missing the Kokoro. So let me. How do we do this? Okay, we can do it like that. And maybe I'll just make this a little bit bigger if I can. Okay, so this line here is corresponding with the final two lines of this cell. So unfortunately, like, that's not the best way to try to like deal with Japanese, because you do need the kind of full context of the line that came before it, but that's not the important part right now. He's just missing the character here, but it's romanized here. This isn't Jean, this is like Hito, but anyway, there's no need for a man like mindful god. This is kind of the painful part of like doing live translations, because like the wording of this is very important, and so like articulating this is kind of difficult to just do on the fly without like inadvertently misleading people. So let me just look at it this way. So one note, I did notice that there was actually another discrepancy in this description, which kind of changes the way that it might be viewed. Wait, no, this is perfectly fine. The current imperfection. Well, no, okay. So this might like be a no-brainer to you guys. I'm just kind of like in my linguistic headspace right here. So like the first character right here is Gen, and it does mean like the current. So it's more like the current Golden Order's instability or incompleteness, in other words, is the wavering of perspective, essentially, or like, what's another word for perspective? This is typically when I would just pull up the English thesaurus here. So the fickleness of a viewpoint, that's a good word. So like the wavering of one's views, wavering of one's viewpoints, perspective. Anyway, so gods who possess hearts like men are useless. So how do I like phrase that a little bit better? I think the localization is really good. Can be blamed on the fickleness of gods. No better than men. Yeah, that's a pretty good localization. So they don't need a god that has a heart like a man. And I don't want to say heart because like this is one of the issues with the word like Hokuto. Like it really does mean heart, but it also means like mind or like mentality. But it's different. Like it's like the spirit. Man, heart is a good word. Anyway, so like because gods have like hearts, they can be swayed like men, and so that's like the issue of their wavering viewpoint. So like because the gods can be swayed, they're useless. So that's why his order needs to be like different, because like this is the issue with the order. It's the gods themselves, and it's because of like the current golden order. So that doesn't mean like this is always the golden order. So this is like the current issue. So if he resolves the god issue, it'll all be fine. Sorry if that's like super obvious in like the grand scheme of things, but it's just kind of, you guys know me at this point. Okay, I read that one. Right. Aldegus is right there. You do agree with that conclusion? It seems he's taking America out of the order, or at least her power over it. Yes. Vantage? Yeah, that's a good one. Viewpoints? Yeah, okay. The more you see people discuss Goldmask's rune and the more you learn about the translation, the more you dislike his ending. Honestly, like, at first I thought it was pretty bad because it kind of could make it sound as like he's taking free will out of it. And in a certain sense, he's taking away like the free will to mend the Elden Ring. But he does firmly believe that the tenets of the actual Golden Order are perfect and that there is no such thing as absolute evil within the tenets, and that it's kind of more of an issue of perspective here. And so, like, the reason why he despairs over the state of the hunters is because they're zealot dogs that don't actually understand the order that they're trying to uphold, and so they're kind of in some ways heretical for thinking that there must be a problem with the order when the order must be perfect by virtue of it being a perfect order in Goldmask's mind. So the issue isn't the order, it's the programmer of the order. Okay, so I'm gonna resume the video.
Order on the human-like reactions of the gods. It was the emotional responses of Marika and Radagon that were to blame. The word gods, plural, means he regarded all gods as fickle. Radagon's actions were in some way fickle alongside Marika's. So beginning with Marika, what emotional response could he be referring to? The most clear event would be the shattering of the Elden Ring. It does seem like a drastic and emotional response from Marika, and as Mignonet suggested, she could have been trying to use the Elden Ring as a means to restore Godwin's soul and bring him back to life. It's obvious when you think about it, but Marika was likely completely devastated by her son's murder. Marika is always called the Eternal God Queen, and maybe we forget how extreme her grief must have been. Her son would have been the first real loss for her, and it could have understandably led to her shattering the Elden Ring in her attempts to bring Godwin back. This event is clearly stated to go against the Two Fingers, and it is the reason they demanded she face punishment. It also appears like an emotional event in the trailer, and Rani claimed Marika was driven to the brink by the Knight of Black Knives. So if it was an emotional reaction out of grief, it could certainly be called an erratic, fickle thing to do. She plunged the whole world into chaos, giving her real Cersei vibes. Now for Radagon being fickle, I think we need to look into his later actions. I personally have the suspicion that he went a bit rogue at some point, going from following the bidding of the Two Fingers to refusing to relinquish his position as Elden Lord.
The tragic corruption of the Order has taken its toll.
We know the Two Fingers are completely dependent on champions to do their bidding, and they have a history of replacing their champions if they ever begin to disobey them. For example, we see the baleful shadows they send for Rani after she refused to be their Empyrean. Furthermore, we know the church confessors were assassins working for the Two Fingers. Led by Crepus, they would hunt down the Tarnished that strayed from grace. We find his Black Key crossbow hidden in the Round Table Hold, as well as the Assassin's Prayer Book, and the Creeper's Vial talisman would have helped them hide in the shadows. So, Radagon's refusal to give up being Elden Lord would also explain why the Greater Will extended grace to the Tarnished. Radagon ultimately failed to repair the Elden Ring, and the realm has fallen into decay. We were the last candidates left to succeed him and repair the Elden Ring. After all, the Two Fingers specifically ask us to become Queen Marika's consort.
Confer great runes to become Elden Lord and join Queen Marika as her consort. The Fingers have willed it so.
So I wonder if Jarhead is saying that Radagon fails to mend the Elden Ring completely, and if that's supposed to be analogous to any of the endings that the player character does, because it is an Age of Fracture in like the base vanilla ending. So if he's trying to suggest that Radagon doesn't do the job, then wouldn't that also imply that the Tarnished doesn't do the job either? And maybe that's kind of like already implicit to some degree. But for what it's worth, I do think that mending an Elden Ring does completely change the order. And I think Radagon did mend the Elden Ring to create like the Golden Order, like fundamentalist stuff, because his rune is imprinted into the Elden Ring, like the little barrier type sigil behind it. And I want to bring up the Mending Rune of the Death Prince specifically. So, where's that one? Death Prince. Okay. So, the Mending Rune of the Death Prince says it creates a new order, which I think is very interesting. So, thus, this new order will be one of Death Restored. Well, the Japanese doesn't like say it so verbatim. It's more like a speculation, but that's like not too important. So, why is his order still broken? Did he say that to like space out? I'm going to back up briefly just to kind of like re-listen to that. Go a little bit further.
To disobey them. For example, we see the baleful shadows they send for Rani after she refused to be their Empyrean. Furthermore, we know the church confessors were assassins working for the Two Fingers. Led by Crepus, they would hunt down the Tarnished that strayed from grace. We find his Black Key crossbow hidden in the Round Table Hold, as well as the Assassin's Prayer Book, and the Creeper's Vial talisman would have helped them hide in the shadows. So, Radagon's refusal to give up being Elden Lord would also explain why the Greater Will extended grace to the Tarnished. Radagon ultimately failed to repair the Elden Ring, and the realm has fallen into decay. We were the last candidates left to succeed him and repair the Elden Ring. After all, the Two Fingers specifically ask us...
I did it again. I spaced out. I'm so sorry.
So, Radagon's refusal to give up being Elden Lord would also explain why the Greater Will extended grace to the Tarnished. Radagon ultimately failed to repair the Elden Ring.
Alright, so he just doesn't say why he failed, because he refused to give up being Elden Lord? Is that it? I was reading chat. Okay. Hey Tyler, welcome in.
And the realm has fallen into decay. We were the last candidates left to succeed him and repair the Elden Ring. After all, the Two Fingers specifically ask us to become Queen Marika's consort.
Confer great runes to become Elden Lord and join Queen Marika as her consort. The Fingers have willed it so.
If Radagon knew they wanted him gone, it feels like a very human and emotional thing for him to lock up the Erdtree. A last-ditch, defiant act of rebellion. A refusal to give up his position. Again, the Two Fingers themselves are powerless if their champions don't follow their orders. And this would be why our Two Fingers froze inside the Round Table Hole. We were their final option to complete Radagon's objective, the one he failed to accomplish. But they are completely bamboozled by Radagon looking up the Erdtree. They
So, right, I'm curious as to why he believes Radagon did not fully mend the Elden Ring. And, yeah, I guess that's something worth considering. Like, if Radagon was trying to repair the ring, was he ultimately failing to do that because the demigod children had already claimed the shards? But if they'd already claimed the shards, how could he, like, try to repair the ring to begin with? Maybe that's, like, the issue in his mind? I don't know.
clearly didn't expect him to pull this move, and they clearly have no answer for it. The only way forward is to burn the Erdtree, and naturally, they would rather continue the facade of order that they helped implement over helping to commit the first cardinal sin. I really think this way of looking at things provides a good explanation for Goldmask's Mending Rune. The emotional reactions of both Marika and Radagon were the failure of the Golden Order. Their human emotions were the fickleness of gods no better than men. That is the fly in the ointment. I hope this all makes sense, and I will admit I'm speculating a lot on what Goldmask's mid-air braille writing could be, but I think this theory is more narratively satisfying, which is important to me, even if it's ultimately a bit inconsequential. But I think holism is a very important term for Corrin to use, so I'd love to know what you guys think of the whole holism implications. User make total...
Okay. I think I can explain this a little bit better now. The Mending Rune of Perfect Order, that the current Golden Order's incompleteness is due to a wavering of viewpoints, whatever you want to say, and gods who possess hearts like men are unnecessary, and that is the flaw of the order. Or that was the flaw of the order. So basically, the thing that I've been saying like this entire time, which is pretty clear even with the English translation here, is that the gods are swayable, and Goldmask wants an unwavering order. So once you get rid of the gods, the thing that gets swayed, then the order will just kind of be automatic. So yeah, anyway.
Destroy asked how Melina's story would fit into the usurping theory. And this is a great question I wish I had time to explore in my original video. So to start with Melina, we absolutely don't know her origins for certain. But personally, I am convinced she is the child of Radagon and Marika. The butterflies alone are very convincing, with the 3 species potentially representing all of their children. 2 of them are definitely representing the twins, the nascent butterfly for Miquella and the Aeonian butterfly for Melina. The 3rd species, the smouldering butterfly, ties in really well with Melina's role as the kindling maiden. So this symbology is linking
I think he said Melina twice, but anyway.
All 3 of them together, and the obvious link would be that they are all Radagon and Marika's children. However, Melina has long been suspected to be the Gloam-Eyed Queen. If she were, then she couldn't be Radagon's daughter, as the Gloam-Eyed Queen was defeated at the dawn of the Golden Order. But as we know Melina is the kindling maiden, I personally don't think she would also be the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Within the usurping theory, if Radagon chained up Marika as soon as he arrived in Leyndell, that would very sadly mean that, like the twins, Melina would have been born under the same Game of Thrones-esque conditions. I'd like to correct something I said in the original video, and I personally think she would also essentially be dead at this point, just as a vessel for the Elden Ring. I think I was a bit too extreme here, as it makes more sense that Marika retained her consciousness during her imprisonment. But anyway, this awful situation for Melina's birth would tie in really well with a small piece of her dialogue regarding Bok.
Your seamster, Bok. I see him crying from time to time. I think he misses his mother. He wants someone to tell him he's beautiful. Does being born of a mother mean one behaves in such a manner?
This is very interesting to me. We know Melina has a mother, as it was her who gave Melina her purpose.
I was born at the foot of the Erdtree, where Mother gave me my purpose.
So then, why would Melina be unaware of what a relationship would be like with her mother? Well, if Marika was locked in the Erdtree for all of her life, then she wouldn't have experienced anything close to a proper relationship with her. When we finally get to the capital, she leaves us to investigate the task she was given. We don't know where she goes, but we can summon her before the fight with Morgoth, the last person standing in the way of the entrance to the Erdtree. After we're victorious, finding the Erdtree blocked by Radagon's thorns, Melina will appear before us again. She's discovered the truth of her purpose, to help us get inside the Erdtree. And crucially, this could also explain why we are escorting Melina to Lanedale in the first place. If Marika is her mother, and she's returning to Lanedale to find the truth of her purpose, then her journey is to return to Marika inside the Erdtree.
The thorns are impenetrable, a husk of the Erdtree's being that spurns all that exists without. The only way to stand before the Elden Ring and become the Elden Lord is to pass the thorns. My purpose serves to aid in that very act.
In the end, this purpose leads to Marika being freed from her imprisonment by Radagon and the Elden Beast. If Marika gave her this task, and this task leads us to killing Radagon, then it makes sense to me that this was the mission all along. Marika gave this to her, knowing it would lead to a Tarnished killing her captors and freeing her from her shackles. This goes completely against the Golden Order, which we know Melina is aware of from our very first interaction.
One of her kind is sure to seek the Elden Ring, even if it does violate the Golden Order.
This all ties in perfectly with the usurping theory and gives more answers to why Melina is on her quest with us. I don't want to claim that I'm the first person to think of this kind of idea for her backstory, and I have to admit, this whole scenario works without the Radagon usurped Marika idea. I just think this is a fascinating part of the lore, and it does tie into the usurping theory really well. This way of thinking could also explain the secret task that Marika gave to Hugh. He promised her he'd create a weapon to slay a god. And, just like with Melina, it makes sense that Marika gave Hugh this mission to ultimately free her from her imprisonment. We know Hugh is devoted to this task, and when we hear him praying to Marika, it does look and sound like he's doing it out of love and devotion. Rodrika does call it a curse from Queen Marika, but I don't think it's a literal curse. Sorry if you haven't seen Naruto Shippuden, but a comparison to this would be how Sakura realises how stressful Naruto's promise to her has been on him. He completely devotes himself to bringing Sasuke back to the Hidden Leaf, and she realises it's like a figurative curse she's put on him. The mental and physical strain of the promise is like a metaphorical curse. Anime reference out the way, as we slay the demigods throughout the game, Hugh remains unsatisfied. So
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it. I don't really know how I feel about it because the way that curse is bandied about in Elden Ring is very inconsistent, to say the least, because we have the literal curses in like the cursed wraith spirits summoned in like the omens and hexes and whatnot. Then we also have the curses talked about within the sore and scar seals of Marika and Radagon, and as well as like the kind of other curse talked about in relation to Hugh and the Tarnished.
But killing Radagon or the Elden Beast would be the real mission Marika gave to him.
Alright, Kimley, you have a good night.
Marika gave Melina and Hugh their secret quests, knowing it would help free her from the Erdtree. Whether by divine prophecy or sheer luck, this goal is ultimately successful. I know this is all speculation on my part, but I think this ties all these characters into the main story of the game in a consistent and gratifying way. I'm not sure exactly how many people believe she's the Gloam-Eyed Queen, or if they think she's Radagon and Marika's daughter, so I'd love it if you guys could let me know.
Alright, so Tea-Watered Houseplant said, you still find Melina saying it violating the Golden Order theory to be odd when the Fingers are fine with the Tarnished seeking the Elden Ring, especially because she doesn't know her goal is to burn the Erdtree or unseal death yet. So, the way that I interpret it would probably be incompatible with Jarhead's in that, in my mind, the Golden Order is fundamentally, pun intended I suppose, affiliated with Radagon, and Radagon wants his age to be absolute, which is why he mended the Elden Ring after Marika shattered it. And so trying to become the next Elden Lord goes against the wishes of Radagon, which is why the Erdtree refuses all but the thorns, because they're created by him essentially. And so to become Elden Lord, you need to infiltrate the Erdtree, which is against the tenets of the Golden Order, because Marika / Radagon are the one and only God, I guess. You don't see any implication that he's taking anyone's will other than Marika, that and Miquella being lost? I don't know who you're referring to with he. Are you talking about like Radagon or Hugh? Alright.
This is one of your really great questions that I hadn't even considered before. And it's true, this question does create a bit of an issue for the Usurping Theory timeline. With Radagon sent to Leyndell to punish Marika for breaking the Elden Ring, then the Night of Black Knives would have already happened. Ranni would have already lost her body before she and her brothers were made into demigods. So then, why on earth would she have a seat at the council around the throne in Leyndell? Well, you could also ask why would Rykard have a chair if he was straight up against the Erdtree and the Golden Order? And why would Radahn have a chair if he was straight up insane wandering around Caelid? They are never seen beyond Morgott's cutscene, so it's unclear what kind of mechanism makes them and dematerialise. One simple theory would be, Radagon naturally would elevate his own children to the council with him. There may have been symbols of their status, and they may have never actually sat in the chairs. There may have just been a chair for each of Marika's direct offspring. It's never explained if being a demigod is something born as or simply a title given.
The demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika.
According to Google, the term direct offspring can be defined as a person who was born into or legally adopted into the direct line of an individual's descent. So, that means Radagon's own children with Rennala are Marika's direct offspring, even though they are stepchildren. And along with Godfrey also being called a demigod, it seems more likely to be a title received. Now, a more complicated theory would be, the council could have been formed as part of the alliance between demigods during the First Defense of Leyndell. The First Defense of Leyndell, a sovereign alliance rots from within. Traces yet remain of bloody conspiracy. We are told aggravatingly little about the first and second defences of Leyndell, including who was in this alliance. All we know is that Godfrey the Grafted was captured after the first defence, and the council could have indeed been created for this alliance. It was during the Shattering War, so after the Night of Black Knives, so Ranni would have already lost her body. As we know, Rykard later fought against the armies of Leyndell in Mount Gelmir, and Radahn later fought Melina in Caelid, so this council has definitely been disbanded for a long time. But all these demigods still have a seat at the council, so they may just remain as figurative representations of the original alliance. It's interesting how small Ranni's chair is compared to the others. We know from her corpse atop the Divine Tower of Liurnia that Ranni was a similar height to Melina, if not taller. So why is her chair so much smaller? Does this mean her chair was made for her doll form? Well, Ch'Darn would also be way too big for his chair, but we don't know when or why he grew so large, so he may have just been a regular-sized demigod during the Alliance. As you can tell, this is a tricky question to answer, with or without the usurping theory, and if you try and look deeper into the history, you'll always find there's far less information than we first realise. I love questions like this. They get me looking closer into details of the lore that I've completely missed before. I honestly didn't even realise there were two defences of Leyndell. I'll keep looking into this one to try and find more conclusive evidence, so if anyone has anything to add to this one, please don't hesitate to let me know. And please keep sending in your amazing questions.
And I do feel as though the whole council thing would imply that the younger two twins were already alive and kicking directly after the Shattering, which I don't think aligns super well with the general timeline of events.
So there are many more questions that I'd love to go over, but there's just too many to fit into one video. I haven't even touched the Mask of Confidence, or the Golden Order Greatsword, or how the twins would have gotten their great runes, or how the twins might even be clones. The biggest question I still want to talk about has to be, is Radagon a silver or mimic tier? Cosmos covered this in amazing detail over a year ago, so it's definitely not a new theory, but since I uploaded the first video, I've seen a lot of people discussing this idea. Many people are still skeptical, but I think it has a lot of potential. There are very small details in particular from a Simi's Cut questline that I feel make this idea extremely interesting.
Hello. Are they you?
I really want to go over this in full detail in a future video, and I think I'd have enough for a whole video just on Radagon's origins, if that's something people want, that is. And on that note, I have to ask all of you to send me any of your thoughts and theories about anything I've covered in this video. I'm just a guy who came up with a wild theory, but you guys made this follow-up video even possible. All your ideas are truly an amazing resource, and I really am touched that so many of you connected with the theory. Many of you disagreed with the usurping theory, but still shared your kind words, and so much encouragement that I can't ever thank you enough. Making these videos has been pretty damn challenging, but an absolute blast. Again, I'd love to make more of these, and it really does turn out that liking and subbing do make a huge difference. I feel weird asking, but anything to help the algorithm would really go a long way. With that, once again, I have to say that all my speculations could be wrong about everything in this video, and I know there's going to be so much that I've missed. I'm hoping some of you will want to see more of these questions answered, and I'm hoping you guys will have even more questions to talk about. Thanks again to anyone who stuck all the way through this one, but I think that's all I've got for this one. And, yeah. I really have no idea how to sign off at the end.
Alright, so I think that was a very interesting video. I'm a little bit torn on liking it, to be honest, because I know he got the direct feedback from my last video and he still kind of went along with this one. I do feel like there are a lot of problems with some of these thoughts here, but yeah, I don't know. I think this is his second video. I do think it's very well produced, and I want to encourage him to continue like working on his channel and stuff. So I am going to go ahead and like it because he's also like very receptive to feedback, and I am fine with that. And he also did establish quite firmly throughout that these were just kind of his ideas and his current perspective on things, and is open to change in the future. So yeah, I am still just like a little bit conflicted though, but nonetheless, I think overall it is a pretty good video, even with my many disagreements. So, okay, I've gone ahead and linked it into chat if you want to give Jarhead a like and a sub, and all of that fun YouTube algorithm stuff. Tyler does enjoy how passionate the people are about these games and lore. You love these games, FromSoft, and this community they've created? Yeah, it's pretty special, isn't it? Alright, so yeah, this is definitely like better produced than my second and maybe even my 5th or 12th video. I don't know. But anyway, this took me a lot longer to react to than I was really anticipating. I was not expecting a 3-hour reaction to a 1-hour video. So I will not be going into Quaylog's video tonight about what is the Crucible in the Elden Ring. So I guess you guys are being let off the hook for another like extra hour and a half of time here. I'm more or less letting myself off the hook, to be honest. All right, so this will kind of conclude my series of streams of watching what other content creators have been creating, because I wanted to keep myself in the dark for a long time. But now, after seeing what other people have produced, it has kind of helped me collect some of my thoughts to give my perspective on certain facets of the lore. So for the current time being, I am going to go back to like taking some more of my free time and focusing it on creating more dedicated videos. So first, I want to finish up my Final Fantasy 16 review. I need to do like all the editing stuff, which is probably going to take a couple more days to finish. So maybe like by the end of the week, I hope to get that published. And then I'll be doing some more short form Elden Ring content. Like I mentioned earlier in the stream, I want to talk about things relating to the Curse of the Dung Eater in his order, Mending Rune ending. I want to talk about Deathbed Companions and Fia's Mending Rune ending, which I guess I should also talk about Gold Masks at this point as well. I guess I already made the Frenzy Flame one because it's a meme one. And I probably won't cover the Ronnie one because I feel like that's been covered to death. And I've also covered it quite a bit in my reaction to like Mad Luigi's video about that, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. I also want to talk about the trees, which I kind of spilled the beans on earlier in the stream, and some other concepts which don't come to mind right now. So for all of you who've stuck through this series of videos with me, I thank you very much. For everybody whom I reacted to, thank you very much for allowing me to do that and sharing your perspectives with me. I do really appreciate that, even if we disagree. I've definitely taken a lot of things to mind from watching these videos, and it's definitely opened other avenues of thought for me as well. So yeah, everybody, thank you so much for joining in. Please consider all the YouTube algorithm nonsense of liking, subscribing, and if you guys still want to have me react to videos, make sure to either throw them in the Discord or comment on this video about what videos you want me to react to in the future. They might not even be published yet, for all we know. So, right. That'll be it for me signing off for now. No more streams for the near future. You guys have a good night, good day, good morning, wherever you are. Last Protagonist out.